that are outstanding we mentioned earlier.
So, William, if you could mute everybody and then unmute me.
The opposition letter also, let's see. Although, of course, the Liberal Democrats have said.
On. Okay, so good evening, folks, and welcome to 10 from 10 Mark 4. We have a great lineup again this evening with Linda Haney, Bill Hall, Brian McClure, David Keep, Joe Houghton, Carol McNiven-Young, Paul Stanley, Paul Keane, Colin Ross, and last but definitely not least, Rod Whelans. So without further ado, I shall share my screen. And if you can give me the thumbs up, William, that you're seeing that okay? Okay. So unfortunately, Linda Haney is having trouble hearing us, but we can't hear her. So I'm just going to open up first with Linda's pictures. So I will just invite
Okay, I'm assuming I can go. Are you still talking, Ross? No? Yes, I can go. Sorry about that. It just feels like I've gone deaf. No, things are happening to this computer. So if I go off, I'm sorry. Right, before I start, I'd just like to very, very, very briefly mention 4 people who've been influential in my journey to where I am today. I haven't been doing this sort of stuff very long, only a couple of years since I joined since I went to Warrington Photographic Society, but in my life I've been taking photographs forever. So first of all, my dad for allowing me to use his Kodak Brownie many years ago. Second one was Tilman Kleinens. I really need to mention because he introduced me to Photoshop, and he also told me to go out and get a digital camera and a computer so that I'd be able to use it. So I did that in that order. That was actually 25 years ago. So I've been using Photoshop for 25 years. Thirdly, Joan Blees. I'd really like to thank Joan for a lot of things, but mainly for making me believe in myself and my ability. She really is very good at that, and this is why I have come on so much in the last few years since joining Warrington. And finally, really, I just need to thank Laurie Campbell for the inspiration I gained from seeing her successful ARPS panel, I think it was. I saw those images and I thought, wow, that's what I want to do, similar to that. And also, Laurie, thanks for mentioning about pushing the sliders to the left. I'm doing that now. It's great. Thank you. So, okay, we'll start with the images. I really would like to be a wildlife photographer, but you've probably all read what I said on the messaging before, and circumstances don't permit me to get out much. So I always think when things aren't working for me, I quote, it's attributed to Albert Einstein, I guess it could be by him, in the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity. So instead of going out there, I go where I can to the zoo or down the road near to the river, and I get what I can. And so I create. One day I really will do some real wildlife stuff, but not just for now. The swan, this was my first successful creative image, and I've done quite well with it. And I don't have ideas. I just generally I create a background and put something in to fit. And I had a background and I needed a swan, so I went off to local river and photographed this swan, and came back and put it into my original image, and it just didn't work. So I created the image around it. But this one got me full marks in the CPA-GB and also did very well in the DPA-GB. So that's probably my favourite one of all time. So next one, please, Ross. The hares. Well, again, this is going back to my wanting to be a wildlife photographer. Not very far away, there's some meadows, and I know the farmer very well. He allows me to walk on all his fields, which is great because I don't meet anybody else. And I was photographing some little birdies. I can't remember what they were now. And I just happened to walk through a gap in a hedge, and I saw this brown bump in the grass. And I think somebody told a story about this a couple of weeks ago, but this wasn't a bin bag, it was definitely a hare. And then the hare stood up, and then suddenly another one stood up. And I have done this as a wildlife shot. They were facing one another to begin with, and I kept walking a little bit further and taking more shots, walking a little bit further. And eventually they just tottered off, and it was spring, and I guess, you know, they were a bit tired. They looked like they'd probably been having a bit of fun beforehand before I came across them. But I've then looked for something. I created this background. I was trying some digital painting with Photoshop, and I created a background, and I went back to my hares and stuck them in different places. In fact, there were different images from the one I'd already used. And this one, again, has done quite well for me. Really been pleased with it. Okay, next one. I don't do many people. This was from a shoot with Joan Blease, Holly, of course, everybody knows Holly. And under Joan's guidance, I did these images. And when it was suggested she put this black dress on, I thought, I don't like black. I couldn't see myself doing something with black. Anyway, I went along with it and photographed it, and she put this thing on her head. And it was quite a while afterwards when I decided I really needed to look at these images. And so that one just made me think of something like a memorial. So I'd been looking at different images of mist and weird things like that, and I just thought I'd try it. And it didn't do very well as a colour image, so I've turned it to monochrome, and it's done quite well as a monochrome. So one of my very few people images. Okay, next one. This is the first one I did with animals from Chester Zoo. Chester Zoo, I'm about 20 minutes away, and so I can, well, up to this year, all of last year, I used to go at least once a week. And I just happened to be there when this baby had just been born the day before, and he came out with his big sister and his mum. And the background was dreadful. And I don't ever cut any of my images out. They're all masked. Everything is masked. And this one, surprisingly, now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, I can't believe that that one did well, because I can see lots of things now that I want to get it back on there and redo it. But I guess that's the process you go through. You know, you sort of learn as you go along. But that's an oak tree that I flattened, trying to make it look like something from where the animals were. And the idea is really, with my zoo animals, is to put them into a background. You know, the zoo's saving the species, so I'm then saving the animals, putting them back into their natural background. I was going to do a series on it, but I've got lots of them on my hard drive, and one day I'll get round to doing the rest of them, but I have moved on from that one. So okay, next one. This one also from Chester Zoo. This is an orangutan called Tuti. She's a juvenile orangutan. Her mum's now got a younger baby. She may even have another one now, I don't know. But I could watch this orangutan all day. As soon as they open the gates, I go fast to where the orangutans are, and they're always outside and they're always playing. And the sacking that she's got round her back, she was holding up. And there were two other images as well with this, and both of them, one of them I've created something with, and then there's another one where it looks like she's playing a musical instrument. So I've got that one to do yet. But I kept looking and looking at this and thinking, I've got to put something in her hands there. And I got my husband, I went out and bought a daily rag, not sure which one it was, and I told him to hold it up, and I couldn't get it right. So again, this learning thing, I just put the paper down on the floor, stood above it, photographed it flat and walked it. So much simpler than trying to get rid of my husband's hands and putting the ape's hands on. And it did take me a while to do, because I didn't know what to put on the front of it. I just used lots of images, and I've always heard from judges, don't put anything with type on, any writing, because the judges will just start reading it. But I think if you just look at it, you get the impact. And I've called it page 3, and I guess everybody in the UK will get that, but I'm not sure how well does in abroad, whether they'd understand page 3. But anyway, it does do well for me, or it has done. It's sort of finished its life now, I think. Okay, thanks. African Pride. This now was after seeing Laurie's images and thinking, I thought, you know, when I saw her images, I thought, oh, lucky person, she's been up here, she's been to Africa, she's been to these places, I wish I could go there. And I thought, well, blow it, you know, never mind, let's just go to the zoo, lots of animal images, and just create. So I did my background first. The hills were in the mountains, they were actually, I flattened them, squished them a bit. They were in Switzerland, and the grass is down the road somewhere in the autumn time. I'm not sure about the tree. Can't remember where I got that from. I've got so many images now. But the lioness on the left and the one in the middle, well, it's on, yes, the left on that far side, the one that's sitting straight up, and the one in the middle were from the same shoot. She just lay down and then she sat up. The one on the right, I think, may be the same one. I've just seen Laurie's message. She's never been on safari, but it did look like it, Laurie. The one on the right could be the same lioness. There are 2 lionesses and 1 lion at Chester, but it was definitely more wintertime because she's got a thicker coat. So I just go through and I find as many images that I think might fit, and I have them all on the screen. And I loosely mask them all, and then I move them around and shuffle them around and move them until I'm satisfied. Then, and finally, only right at the very end, I do the proper masking, and I then use a little brush and create a bit more fur, and just to try and make it look more realistic. So that was the start of my zoo images that I'm going to do a series of, but I've only done about 4, so I've got a long way to go. Okay, next one. Right, this is my mum. My mum's now 96. I took this one 3 or 4 years ago now. She's now blind in her left eye. She'd had skin cancer, and unfortunately, due to an operation, it caused a problem with her eye. She still lives on her own. She's absolutely fine. And one day when I went to see her, she gave me this little tiny photograph, the one that you can see there on her right. And I said, oh, Mum, I've never seen that before. She said, well, this was when I was 18, just before I married your dad. She was only 18 when she got married, just at the end of the war. And she said it was bright blue. She said, I love that dress. She said, I'd saved up such a long time. And she was working in service at the time, so she must have saved for a while to buy it. And she said, but you know, this is still me. She said, I don't see, she said, if I look in the mirror, that's not who I am. That's me, that person in the photograph. And that's why I've called it I Am She, She Is Me. But she asked me if I could make a large photograph of it. So I did do, and I bought a frame for her, and I put it in the frame for her. And then I put it on this one because the original had one of my dad on. So I thought this would make more of a story. And when I gave it to her, she said, oh, no, I want you to keep it. So I said, well, why do you want me to keep it? And she said, well, because this is the one I want to put on the coffin. She said, you know, when you go there and you see all these photographs on coffins of these old people, she said, please don't put an old one of me on. I want this one there. She said, and take no notice from your sisters. That's the one I want. So I'm going to have a fight with my sisters, perhaps. Well, maybe not. I'm the eldest anyway, So yeah, that's very special to me, that one, and it has done quite well for me, even without people knowing the story. Young giraffes, again, Chester Zoo. This background I did for rhinos, I think in mind. I mean, I have things in mind, but I do a background and I just add different layers and bring back parts of it. And then I've got several images of 2 giraffes playing, a young male and a young female that were born last year. This is actually the male in both shots because the female one didn't fit. Again, I've got several of them and tried to do each one. And this one just fit. They were both in the right position. None of the ones I had of the female fitted it. So yeah, this one again has done well. That's why I've chosen it, obviously, but I do like it. I've watched those giraffes. I always go and see them, and he's getting quite big now, and he'll be going soon because the dominant male won't be putting up with him, but I hope the zoo opens before he goes. Okay, the next one. Right, this one, they were asking at Warrington, did anybody have any monochrome images? And I'm not very good at monochrome. I keep looking at yours, Ross, and watching your tutorials, and I never get anything like that. I keep going too far or not far enough. And anyway, I think I found the secret. You need to print them. Don't show them digitally. I do print all of my stuff, and it's all, everything's, you know, I will put them into competitions as digitals, but I much prefer the printed image, and usually on art paper. This one, again, I had about 20 zebra images there, again, very loosely masked, so you could just see bits of them, and till I found this one that worked. And I had no idea what I was looking for. This just came together, and the two on the left were both looking at something, probably turning round. I don't know what they were doing, but the one on the right was looking at the one on the floor, who was fast asleep in the sunshine. And I put the vulture on because I thought, for me, it made the story. And a couple of judges have said they didn't see the point in the vulture. Take it off the image. And I took it off, and I looked at it and looked at it. And next time I went to enter it, I thought, no, why should I do that? I want to be true to what I feel. It didn't sit right with me just to have the zebra there. So the vulture goes on. So that one's called Vigil. So it's a black and white one. I don't do many. Okay, next one, I think, is the last one. Yes. Oh, yeah, no, there's one more. Sorry, yes, say the next one is the last one. Sorry, Ross. This one, and I want to say that I knew what I was doing when I created it, but I created the background, and again, for some zoo animals. And then just a few days after I'd created it, I do a lot of, I'd spend ages doing backgrounds and then sit them there and then just go back through them and have a look if I find something to see what will fit with them. And I'd found these horses in the field, well, not found them, they were there, and they were playing, and they weren't playing together. The grey one was playing with a tiny one that was kicking its back heels up at the grey, and that's why it had turned its head away. But the little one had a jacket on, a coat on, and it just didn't look right. Yeah, it just didn't fit. And the black one was playing with another horse, and the other one was chasing it, and it was just, the other one was just about to bite it on the bum. So I've had to use the tail off another one of these because the other horse's head was in the way. But again, these were the only two I actually put on this one because I could see by the positions of them that they fit. And then I think it was Joan that said, oh, it looks like an old master's, that. And I thought, oh, I can tell everybody I created this to be an old master. But again, really the digital doesn't do it justice. For me, the print is the thing. And I print this on fine art. I think it's Permajet Museum I tend to use. And it really does work, and it works for me. And I'm just really enjoying them. And yeah, that's all my images. So I just looking forward to see where my creativity will take me in the future. And I was going to say, thanks everybody for listening. I can sit back and listen to yours now, but I'll have to watch them on YouTube. So good luck to you all, and I will be joining you on YouTube. So thanks, Ross. And
thanks, Linda. So I was just messaging Linda that I awarded this in Southport as a print. Ricky O'Neill, Terry Donnelly and myself were the three judges at Southport. And I'm fairly sure that got the top colour print, that one. It was a really lovely print. As Linda says, it was on a fine art paper. So next up is Bill Hall. So William, can you unmute Bill? Bill, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bill, you are a member of Rolls-Royce.
Indeed.
and a nature worker primarily, are you?
Well, that and a few other things. We'll see in a minute.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just open up your 10 and hopefully they've all come in there. I think so. Okay, so full screen. Okay, Bill, you're on.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Looking good. Hope you're all enjoying the lovely bank holiday weather that we're having. Just a little bit of background. For those who don't know me, I think quite a few on there here I do recognise. I started photography just nearly 40 years ago now. When my first daughter was born, I went and bought a reasonable camera and thought, how do I find out how to use this? And I was working at Rolls-Royce in Derby at the time. So I went and joined Rolls-Royce Photographic Society. I'm still there now as a honorary life vice president, so I'll always be a member. But 2 years ago I retired, moved to Cornwall and joined True Raw Camera Club. So what I was going to say then, since I moved to Cornwall, it's given my photography another shot in the arm. I think having another area to look around at and you know, a new club, it's really helped, and having more time in retirement as well. Although Linda would like me to do a lot more work around the house and on the allotment, but I have managed to get more time to myself to do things. But I'm going to start with a favourite old one, really. This is way back, 2011, I think, the winter of 2011, we had an influx or an eruption of these waxwings. This was in Derbyshire, South Derbyshire, a little village called Ticknell, and it had been reported on the local bird watching site. Something I check every day actually now in Cornwall. I check the bird watching site to see what's around, and these were hanging around for a week or so while I was at work, and I managed to get out on the Saturday morning, and it was a lovely frosty clear morning in the churchyard at Ticknell. So that's the background there is the church roof. So that's a waxwing picking up a rowan berry. They seem to really like any red berries. One of the reasons why you find them when they do come over from Scandinavia some winters, we find them a lot in supermarket car parks, because they seem to be fond of planting Cotoneaster and Berberis plants in Asda and Tesco car parks. So you'll often find them there actually. Okay, next. So this one's in Chester Zoo, Linda. Has she gone? Yeah, actually, no, I have been on safari several times. When working, my job used to take me all over the world. And when working in South Africa once, the agent out there took me to Kruger Park for a weekend. Now, Kruger Park is 5 times the size of Cornwall, and we had a weekend. So we dipped in and saw a little bit, but that really kicked me off in wildlife photography back in, that would have been about 1989, 90, I think. So I went back again on a trip with 3 of the guys from Rolls-Royce, three of my friends, Neil Humphreys, John Horrocks and Keith Wood, for my 50th birthday, which was 2003. I was still on film then. And then I went back 13 years after that again, 2016, when I took this and took Linda. And it was really a joy to be there with Linda, because it was her first time in Africa, first time on a trip like this for her. And we did it all ourselves. So it's not, you know, not guided or anything like that. We drove ourselves around. Because I'd been before, I knew, you know, a lot of the places where to go and look for stuff. But it is potluck in a way, but you use your bushcraft in a way, look for where the vultures are circling for kills and that sort of thing. So I was really pleased to get this one. I love it. It's never done any good in competitions, funny enough, probably because of that little bit of branch hanging down over his head. But just that stare and that blood around his mouth, you know, that's a real feeling of, you know, Africa for me, something I really, really like. Okay, next. So jumping forward quite a bit now to more recent times, a couple of years ago, probably just before I retired this, I'd gone up to Scotland to be one of the selectors at the Scottish International. And on the way back down, all the way down to Cornwall. I stopped off at a place not far from Rod, actually, in Dumfries and Galloway, near Kirkcudbright. Is that right, Rod? Yeah, Kirkcudbright. Some of you will know Alan McFadden's place. That you'll have been there. And this was my third trip up to Alan's setup there. It's really great. The Kingfisher setup. I'd never be able to do this myself. I don't think do this kind of setup myself. But it got quite addictive. So I'd had a couple of failed trips where I never really got the pictures I wanted. So I went back and with a newer camera, which we're shooting now at a higher frame rate, at 10 frames a second, set at a 4,000th of a second. You probably don't realize it if you've never done it, but that Kingfisher's in and out, in about a 1/6 of a second. So at 6 frames a second, you can miss it. 10 frames a second, you might get one. Some people seem to think that it's set up with a remote trigger to trigger the camera, and all you do is put your card into their setup on their camera. That's certainly not the case at Alan's. You've got to do it yourself with your own kit and your own timing. So, it does take a bit of skill. I found after 3 trips, I could do it, but I still, threw hundreds away and kept about 4 or 5. Again, they don't do that well in the UK. I think we've seen so many of them, when the guys did them, the first guys that did them were doing really well. Jamie MacArthur, a good friend of mine from our club, was one of the first to get in and do these and did really well with them. But abroad, I've just sort of rekindled my FIAP efforts and sending them off to, the Far East and South America and places like that. This one's been picking up a few medals. But it's done well in Cornwall because I don't think there's been many people down here doing them. But otherwise, national exhibitions or UK international exhibitions often doesn't even get accepted these. But I've been asked to show you my favourite pictures. I had a lot of joy getting that picture, and I still enjoy looking at it. Okay. So down to Cornwall now. Again, this was just before I retired, I think. Kevin on here will know this location very well, but it's not one of the main sites where they have the surfing tournaments. This is further down, and one of my favourite spots in the world, actually, at Sennin. Sennon's just a couple of miles from Land's End. It's got a fabulous beach and a lovely little harbour and nice cafes. And I just love going there. It's a really, really spot-on place for me. And it's about 30 miles, I guess, from where I am in Stithians, which I'm near Falmouth. So this one worked for me, I think, for the shape of the guy. Again, I like doing action. I like doing high-speed stuff, high shutter speeds. And you take lots and lots of pictures, and of course you throw lots and lots away, but it's just getting the right shape. And as you'll probably see with some of David's pictures coming up as well with the sport, quite often it's about getting the right expression on a picture, on the sports person as well. So that's Sennin Surfer. It's done quite well for me. Okay, go on. This golden ring dragonfly, I'd like to say was taken in Cornwall. We do get them down here, but it's actually at the other end of the country. It was up on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, and I'd gone up with a good friend of mine, Gian Piero Ferrari, to photograph pine martens, and he found this in the grounds of where we were staying. So it was very cold and not moving, so it was easy enough to take pictures of. And that's been really one of my most consistent, successful nature pictures. It's just simple, isn't it? But nice quality. I do like the nice clean background on that, but the judge at Truro Camera Club said she wanted to see more in the background, which sent me off in high dudgeon at the end of the night, as it happens, because it only got a low mark. But there you go. I'm quite happy with it myself. It's done really well for me. And Linda can hear everybody now, so she's just said, so that's brilliant. So I'm glad she's staying around to hear the rest of the talk. So again, we're back in Cornwall again. This one, actually, the judge who's looking in did like and gave it the best picture on the night at Truro Camera Club, but it's won a few gongs, this one, is in landscape classes. I do like to do landscape as well. Down here, it's mostly seascape, but I love the storms that you get. And this was February 2018, I think. And we had 2 named storms came through in a couple of weeks. And we had a couple more last year, 2019, which I didn't get anything out of. Sometimes you get the sideways rain as well with the storms, and you can't really take pictures in those conditions. But I had Linda watching out for me on the rocks on this one when the bigger waves come over. And you did have to keep, one eye out for the waves. And I just took lots of pictures, and I just love the shape of the waves in this one. I think it's on about a half a second or a quarter second shutter speed or something like that, f16, f22, something like that. But yeah, I quite like the conversion to black and white on that one. It seemed to work better. And that's Godrevy. That was Godrevy Lighthouse, which is near St Ives. You'll know it. Again, another action one when you get conditions right. I do love to go down to the coast and take the waves, and particularly I like doing the surfers. This one, you can see his t-shirt, it's got Boardmasters on, and I call it Boardmaster. So this one was at Fistral Beach, which is near Newquay. And again, it's about the shape, I think, but the fact that this guy had just done a pirouette and sent that sort of big halo of water out around him. They're incredible, and a lot of them are just young guys. I'm sure they've got suckers on their feet. How they stay on, I don't know. And I have actually seen them do a full 360 while going at speed on a wave, so it's something that I'm enjoying doing down here, and hopefully there'll be some opportunities to get out and do some again soon. I know there are some surfers out there, but they're not doing the tournaments as, under the current restrictions. Okay. Somebody just asked me what length lens for the surfers. I'm actually using a 500mm on a crop sensor camera, so it works out at 750, because they're a lot further out where the big waves are than you think when you get the big waves and the big action. When they come in closer to the shore, where you can see them easy, the waves have kind of flattened out by then, so you want to get them when they're out in the big waves. So this is my little pal Oliver, the fastest whippet in the West, on the right. This has been probably my most successful picture of late. I do love doing, like I say, action and speed stuff, and the whippets are pretty rapid. They can run it over 40 miles an hour. Their acceleration is incredible. They'll beat a greyhound over 20 yards, but not round a track. A greyhound's about the only thing that will beat them. But Oliver on the right there is particularly fast, and this is just another random whippet that we found with somebody on a beach, and they went for a run. And you don't see this, of course, when you're taking the pictures. You just sort of, I use, continuous tracking, a 70 to 200 lens for these, and let them come to me. But usually he's chasing a ball, and I've got lots of pictures of him catching the ball in mid-air and in mid-flight. He's brilliant on it. So,
any idea what your shutter speed was there, Bill?
Yeah, I always set it at least a 2000th for the whippets, but if it's brighter, I'll go up to a 4000th, same as the kingfishers, and the same on the surfers, between a 2000th and a 4000th, I think is.
Yeah, that looks like a 4000 to me. I have to say.
It probably is. I can check, but yeah, it's pretty quick. I was just lucky to get them both in the same plane, really, and they're both sharp.
Yeah, excellent.
I'm going to choose expression again. Right, another high speed, shutter speed. These things are fast too. Atlantic bluefin tuna. So this was on a trip last year. I went out last summer on a pelagic trip, birdwatching pelagic trip, out from Penzance on a boat called Mermaid 2. Ostensibly to look for things like shearwaters and storm petrels and things like that, which we didn't see a lot of. But there was a lot of activity with baitfish jumping out, and then garfish and mackerel after the baitfish, and then these things, and dolphins chasing the mackerel and the garfish. And if you look at that right-hand pectoral, sort of left-hand side of the screen, there's a bit of something coming off the end of that fin. That's a garfish, which is a long eel-like fish that leapt out of the water with this, what could have been a 400, 500, 600 pound Atlantic bluefin tuna chasing after it at probably, you know, the sort of speed that the whippets go at, 40 mile an hour. But it was a bit of luck, really, that I happened to be pointing the lens, but I did see all the boils and swirls and the fish jumping out, and I pointed the lens towards it, and then this thing just launched itself out while I was looking in that direction through the viewfinder. You just hit the motor drive and hope you've got one. It is a bit of a biggish crop, so probably wouldn't go up to a big print or anything, but it's been in exhibitions. It's never had awards, but I love it because it was something that really gave me a thrill at the time. And I found that it's been a very successful picture for me in other ways. Outside of competitions and exhibitions, it's opened some doors down here because it got seen on Mermaid's website. They used it as a banner headline picture. And one or two other people have got in touch with me, and you know, that's led to other things. And one guy is going to take me out to have a go because he can actually catch and release them. The strange thing is that the quarters in the UK, the Cornish fishermen weren't allowed to fish for these, but the Portuguese and the Spanish and the French could because they'd applied to the EU for a quarter. So it's all a bit strange that, you know, they could come and catch these in Cornish waters under the Cornish fishermen's noses, and the Cornish fishermen couldn't. But this guy, I've got to know, has got the rights to go out and tag and release for scientific purposes. So I'm hoping to get out and do some of that. It'll be late summer, early autumn, sort of August onwards, with the warmest temperatures around here, and the sea's going to be October time. So, and I think David, who's coming up later on, is coming down late September, and we're going to go out and have a go at these with Nigel and maybe Blue Shark as well. All right, well, I couldn't leave you without one of my signature tits on sticks. It's something I've sort of got a reputation for, and I love doing. And this is really hot off the press, not been seen anywhere yet. And during lockdown, I've been lucky that I've been given permission to have sole access to a field just opposite the house. At the bottom of there's a stream, lots of trees. So I've set a hide up. I've got all sorts coming in. I'm doing quite well with jays. The woodpeckers have disappeared. I don't know where they've gone. But obviously you get all the small birds coming in. So on one of our hour-long walks, I found this bit of beautiful merino sheep wool just the other side of the village, really soft. And I thought, I'll try putting that on a bit of blackthorn there. And it was just about a month ago when the blackthorn was flowering, and see if anything comes and takes a fancy to it for its nest. And luckily, little blue tit stood up and performed for me. And I've got it hanging upside down and all sorts of pictures on this, but that one I thought worked quite well for me. So that's it from me, tits on sticks. Thanks very much.
Excellent, Bill. Thank you very much for taking part. Next up is Brian McClure. So if you can mute Bill, William, and unmute Brian. Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, all.
Brian McClure is the new chairman of Catchlight for the next 2 years. For your sins.
For my sins, absolutely.
And your DPAGB.
Yep.
And let's see what you have got for us.
Well, good evening, all. And before I start talking about the images individually, I came to this photographic business rather late. I bought my first camera about 8 years ago, possibly 8.5 years ago. I wanted something to do when I retired that would be of interest to me. I was reasonably computer literate, so it seemed to me that I could, after a bit of training, develop Photoshop, etc. But my greatest regret was I traveled the world in the jobs that I did, and I look back now and wonder how many pictures could I have taken had I been interested in photography at that time. Anyway, there you are. The images I selected they've been exceptionally good for me in terms of success, both at international and national levels. And I selected them simply because overriding, I like them. And several of them are composites, where I like to take a composite, like to take a photograph and build maybe a bit of history around that photograph that I hope to tell you about as we move through them. And anyway, this one is, I think Lynn Morris would call this a accidental photograph. I had gone up to the north coast where we live here in Northern Ireland to photograph a military event, actually. And it was taken off calendar for some reason I can't quite remember. So heavy rain started to come on, and I decided I'd make my way home. As I set off home, I saw this go-kart track close to where I was. So, you know, bagging an opportunity, I got the camera and went over in terrible conditions, actually. But nevertheless persisted and got myself, I think, into the right part of the track where I could look down and see the action coming towards me, and sort of see if I could take some sort of reasonable photographs from that position. Anyway, I did, and the rain had just stopped, and you got the spray coming up, as you can see here. Now, in normal circumstances, this would, without the rain and the spray, this would be not a particularly exceptional picture at all. But the spray combined, and the rain was just finishing at the time, and you got you really got the rich saturated colors, I think, coming out. Given that one was, if you like, the subject was coming towards me, and the spray was going behind it, so it didn't in any way interfere with the quality, certainly of the first machine. And I think, anyway, that it's a more dramatic shot. It certainly appears to me to be infinitely more dramatic than had it been just simply a photograph taken of three carts coming at you without any sort of influence from the rain at all. So it has done exceedingly well for me. It was in the PAG Interfed competitions and won the last outing. It won a Neil Marshall medal at that event. This one here has been my most challenging. It's a composite, in fact, it's a composite, I think, of 13 or 14 images. And it has been my most challenging composite that I've ever done. Where it is, it's a background in County Donegal. It's taken in the Galtack area at a little village called Dunlewy, which is just northwest rather, of Errigal Mountain. It was an area of Donegal that suffered terribly during the 1840 Irish famine. And this is an interpretive centre that has been built on the site of a series of very, very brutal evictions that took place around that time. I wanted to, the picture, the girl is by no means a professional model. She's actually a solicitor with Arthur Cox and Co. And she was with a group, four of us were in this cottage. This cottage is preserved. It's the guy who was a weaver is a guy, Manus Ferry, who was a particularly brilliant weaver in the last century. So they've tried to retain as much of the character of the setup as possible. The light that day was moving from extremely harsh through the window here, and the background lighting was very, very simple, soft box, just about down at 5 o'clock there. What I wanted to do, or what we wanted to do, was to try and get the light outside in such a way that it wasn't burning out the whole image. But I succeeded in getting maybe 10 shots in different angles, but sort of couldn't get them to, it was either too bright, she was lost, she was either blocked out completely or burned out. And I think it was Terry Donnelly in his last talk to us that he has a similar photograph taken where he brought a guy in looking out a window. Well, I brought her in, and she's not full size, she's actually slightly smaller than what she should be, but your brain really doesn't pick that up. I wanted to bring the bed in. I wanted to show the confines of this room. And I think I did this by trying to get all the artifacts, if you like, that would have been present at that time into the room by moving various aspects about within the room. The lamp wasn't there. The curtains had to be pulled back to allow her hand to appear to be doing that. I could have made her, I could have put a shawl. I've done this many times, putting a shawl over, but I think you lose the impact. You can see, at least I can see, she's waiting for someone. It could well be that she's waiting for the bailiffs in a different century to come and evict her. Obviously, she's not dressed for that, but could be made to act that part. But I just like it from the fact of the lighting on her face, the outline on her face, and the fact that it took me such a long time to get it into what looks to be a cohesive picture.
I never knew it was a composite.
Pardon?
I never knew it was a composite.
Well, it's a multiple composite. This one, again, it has been exceedingly good for me in terms of awards and so forth. You may have been invited by the Beyond group this year or last year to participate, and you'll see that this guy was on their frontispiece offering you to come along and join in the competition. The backdrop is interesting. It's Mount Stuart House. He, by the way, is a barber, a local barber, Gary Jackson, who is, I think you'll agree, a fairly photogenic character. The background, I was invited, this Mount Stuart Palladian house is on the east side of Strangford Lough in Northern Ireland. It dates back to 1744, about when it was formed as Mount Pleasant, but it has a most interesting background. This room, for instance, in 1936, von Ribbentrop, who was Hitler's foreign secretary, actually was invited over by Lord Londonderry, the family who owned the house. And it's a very controversial meeting that they did have, because in those days with Chamberlain appeasement and all going on, people would think that, or a lot of people criticized him for bringing one of Hitler's henchmen over. Anyway, what I did, we took this in Townhouse Studio. The figure is Townhouse Studio, four guys in the club combined, and we go and do these things. But I thought I would try and introduce something that had a bit of history, and it's in this room that von Ribbentrop did most of his conversation with Lord Londonderry. And I often thought that the two sitting together, to my mind, they're gambling with Europe here, hence the theme running through it of the cards and so forth. But in that room is it's a room of extreme historical significance. Next. Now, this one definitely is an opportunistic shot. My wife and I, we often go over to London in June for the beading retreat ceremony and so forth. And anyway, we had gone to the ceremony and we're walking up towards Trafalgar Square. And believe it or not, whistles started. You can see that the lassie at the front here, she's carrying a whistle. And she was the vanguard, if you like, for about 200 nudists, all coming behind her. You can see to the right there from the Strand, where the bus in the distance is coming out of the Strand. And so you're coming up into Trafalgar Square. And I really think it's a very sharp shot. People have said, is it some sort of a composite? But if you look closely at the taxi, I know I can do composites, but I can't really do them that good. You can see a very, very veiled outline of the figure in the back door of the taxi. And that really is her. And yes, she does have a nice hat. She has a nice, nice whistle, but certainly a very interesting shot. Just quickly, the camera was around my neck, fortunately. I had about half a second to try and react to that. So think of that what you may.
Do you have photographs of the other 200 following behind?
Oh yes, I do have, and I'll introduce you to those.
I look forward to seeing those.
But this one, I thought, obviously, big London in the background and so forth, was well worth preserving. Now, this character I claim to have made famous. He's a very good friend. He's a member of our club, Gerald Gribben. He probably is the most excellent creative photographer that I've come across. He never, ever ceases to have new creations that he involves himself with in
He's on
photograph.
next week, by the way.
Is he on next week?
He's on next week.
This photograph, some of you may see from the Scottish Federation brochure. I think it was the catalogue, rather. I think I have it here. I can maybe show it to you while we're...
Just happen to have it there, Brian.
I just happen to have it here. But you can see the picture is on the Scottish International Salon of 2016. He has won for me several gold medals around it. All of those that I've shown you have either won a gold or a silver medal, by the way. The lady nipping through London just 2 weeks ago won a gold medal from the Baltic salons. But Gerald here is an exceedingly good model. He's very cheap as well. But certainly that's been one of my more successful pictures of Gerald.
What was the title for that one, Brian?
It's Man of Mystery, sorry.
Man of Mystery, yeah.
And
sorry.
so next, please.
This,
Well,
I mean, this is probably your best known picture, Brexit.
It's absolutely well known. And again, someone in the past has said that if you can link a title to a picture, you've got it made. This one didn't start off as Brexit. In fact, it started off with a very long name. I can't quite remember, but a series of evolutions through talking with different people. Brexit at that time, the time that I put this together, Brexit was really coming to the forefront in England, principally in the fight to stay or not to stay. Now I'm a Remainer. I was a Remainer, and I'm still a Remainer. And I saw this picture. Again, the model is a guy, Stephen Wilson, who is a member, well, was a member of our club. He is a very excellent contortionist. He runs, I think he's a certain part of a circus school, circus academy. So he can get himself into an awful lot of shapes and sizes. It's a composite, obviously, before you think he was that mad. But I thought it was particularly good at the time because I saw the aircraft at the back, the Pitt Special, with the national colours diving to the ground. That to me represented the people who were leaving, the British who were leaving. I saw him as the elite business person getting out where he could and parachuting down into Europe to stay in Europe. So that was my take on the picture. It represented the club. It was one of 20 images put forward at the FIAP World Cup, which we won, I think, in 2017, Ross, was it?
Yeah.
Anyway, 2017. It was one of our 20 images. There's another one coming up, which was the second one. But interestingly, trying to combine a wee tiny bit of history, the goggles are from the Imperial War Museum, and they actually saw combat in Malta. Some of you may have read the story of Faith, Hope, and Charity, which were 3 biplanes at the early siege of Malta around about 1941. These 3 or 4 aircraft defended Malta until it could be reinforced proper. These goggles were used by one of the pilots in Faith, which, by the way, you can see in Valletta, the museum in Valletta. And so I thought I would stick these things onto his hat and give him a little bit of historical significance. The brevet, the wings, in other words, are from a pilot's uniform that was used in the Battle of France before France fell to the Germans. So again, both taken from the Imperial War Museum, and I think adds a little poignancy to the picture. Next. Again, I think a lot of people would recognize this. I would see this as my second most successful image. This one, again, was at the World Cup of FIAP, along with the previous image. They were both shown at the World Cup, in which we were successful, as I say. It's a very simple picture, really. The inspiration was another friend, Joe Weiss, a club member, and we'd gone shooting in this small studio in Belfast, townhouse studio, which is gone. And Joe had rigged up this Venetian blind on a piece of wood. And I think Gerald Gribben, the guy who you saw with the whiskers. He was holding it. And we just played around with some shots. And lo and behold, this thing which I've called The Fugitive has come out of it. It was mentioned, we were in, the club was, there was an article put in Amateur Photography a year ago possibly. And it was, this one, along with 3 or 4 other pictures, was selected by the author to talk about. And he saw this as one of the most perfect mono prints, his words, not mine, but certainly following a theme of a movie theme as he saw it.
It's okay, it's all right.
Next picture.
Pongo.
This is Cebu, is the proper name of this orangutan. He's the oldest orangutan in Dublin Zoo. He had just returned, I believe, from services, shall we say, at Amsterdam Zoo. And when they constructed the new orangutan island in Dublin Zoo, this guy became the main character. I had to do an awful lot of work with the back of the image to try and take out all the background, which really wasn't conducive to a good picture. He has won many. He's won a couple of gold medals, and he's done well with any the salons that I've entered. I left his name as Pongo, which is the scientific name, by the way, for an orangutan, or one of the scientific names. I was tempted to call him his proper name, but thought this would maybe elicit a little bit more interest in what was happening to him, you know. But nevertheless, excellent as far as I was concerned. I was tempted at times to take the straw out and put a pipe in, but I resisted doing that there. He was selected for the 57th Edinburgh exhibition last year, along with another picture which is coming up shortly. So I thought it very good that he was put into that exhibition. This is the second picture, if you like, that was selected for Edinburgh last year. I've called it Cruciverbalist, which is a fancy name for a puzzle man or a crossword man. The backdrop, again, is Mount Stuart. And in this particular instance, in 1903, I think it was, Edward VII and Queen Alexander visited Mount Stuart. And this was the room in which they did most of their meeting and greeting. And I thought it appropriate that I would put him into this background, not known to anyone other than me, of course, but it's nice when you can talk about not only the picture, but you can talk about the background to it. So this room, again, is of historical significance, in as much as I think the royal party stayed a whole 3 days, but spent most of their time in this library at Mount Stuart. Next. Well, this one again has won a couple of gold medals recently. It's a local girl, a good model, an excellent model, in fact, Christine Rock. It was taken in Catchlight Studios, and Time to Say Goodbye is the title. But when I first constructed this picture, I thought I would take the rabbit out of focus a little bit by putting some Gaussian blur into him, and also the clock, and leave her face as sharp as could be. Now, Mr. McKelvey was thinking of selecting a few images for some competition I think we're going to do, well, before COVID-19 arrived. And he was very critical of the blur between the rabbit and the face. And he said to me, when you did the cutout or you did the composite there, you didn't do it properly. Well, it isn't a composite, but I rest my case. I had sort of thought I was doing the right thing by taking the sharpness out of the rabbit. So it's a standing joke between us, don't mention the rabbit.
Don't mention the rabbit.
I took his advice, I have to say, and
removed the blur.
So I think it's now acceptable to all concerned. So I think, is that my last?
That's your 10, Brian, yeah.
Okay. I should say that Brexit also won a gold medal at the Scottish Photographic So
Just lying. He was just actually sitting on his bottom on a stool.
That's right.
And then leant back, and you stood over him and took the shot.
The one thing I would say that in our club there are 4 members. I think Ross is 2 of them, but 4 of our members have gold medals from the Scottish Photographic Federation, and I think that's rather unique. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So next up is David Keep. If we can mute Brian and unmute David.
Hi there.
Hi, David. You're a busy man during the lockdown. I see you presenting to clubs all over the place.
Yeah, a bit of zooming. Been zooming all around.
So I think that'll be the word of the 2020, Zoom. Okay, so I will select your 10 here, hopefully. That look okay to you, David?
Yeah, that looks fine. Thanks, Ross, and hi, guys, and thank you for inviting me tonight, Ross. I've picked images that mean something to me, so they're not necessarily my most successful images, but they mean something to me. So I'm a member of Rolls-Royce. I've only been into photography just over 5 years, but my photography really kicked on when I joined Rolls-Royce, and I have Bill Hall to thank for that. He allowed me in, as it were, and welcomed me, and my photography really kicked on from joining Rolls-Royce. This image is special to me because I'm an engineer by background, and where I learnt my trade was with British Coal. And I was with British Coal from the age of 18 through to 28, 29. And I never thought I would be able to get an image underground, but we started a project alongside a good friend of mine. We started a project with the National Mining Museum up in Yorkshire, and we made a number of visits to them. And this is kind of a way I've worked quite a lot, actually. Work with an organisation or a sporting body and get images for them, give them images, and then build up to pluck up the courage to ask for the image that I want. So we shot lots of images for them, which they used in their publicity material. And after 5 or 6 visits, after everybody knew us and we were really comfortable, we asked, would it be possible to go underground? And it really is underground. You go down a full mine shaft, and this really is a mock coal face. And they kindly agreed to open the museum a couple of hours early, 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And they went through with the deputies, first of all, to make sure there was no gas there. It's a very well ventilated face anyway. And that meant we could go down and we could take our flashes and so on. So there's quite a lot of setting up to get this shot. But yeah, it's a really special image to me because it takes me back to my early training when I was sort of 20, 21, 22. So next image, please. Well, this one is a bit of self-indulgence, really. Like most people, I don't think I'm photogenic at all, and therefore, whenever I see an image of myself, I cringe. I'm a diver as well, and I've got even less images of myself diving. So I thought, and I'm rubbish at composites, that's why you don't see many composites from me. I really can't do it. But I thought, oh, let's have a go, put it all together. So yeah, that really is me. And actually, I took the shot lying over a stool on some cushions, and what you can't see is the remote trigger in my left hand. So it's a selfie, effectively. And then I cut myself out and put myself in a mangrove swamp from Indonesia. And then I thought, well, I need to be doing something, and that's why I thought I'd be a policeman, a police diver, looking for a gun. So it's called Discovery of the Missing Evidence, but it really is a bit of fun, a bit of self-indulgence, really. Okay, next one, please.
For a man who says he doesn't do composites now, that's well done, David.
Yeah, well, that's my best one. That's why it's there. So this image is very special to me because it probably will be, and I'm not being disingenuous when I say this, it probably will be the best image I ever take. I doubt I'll ever beat it. I went up to Shetland to photograph the gannets, diving gannets. I love gannets anyway. I first photographed them at RSPB Bempton near Bridlington. I love gannets, and I'm a diver as well, so naturally, why wouldn't I want to try and get underwater and see them diving? I'm not the first person to have done it. A guy that pioneered it was a guy called Richard Shucksmith, and he won actually, I think, Natural History Photographer of the Year in 2011. I remembered I'd seen an image somewhere. I Googled, looked at past winners, found it was him, and the wonders of the internet, isn't it? Within less than an hour, I'd found out it was Richard Shucksmith. I'd Googled him. I found out he now lived in Shetland, and his mobile number was on his website. I rang him and I said, Richard, can that still be pulled off? And he said, well, there's not many people asked about doing it, but yeah, I'm sure we could. And I went up to Shetland and took these images, and it was a magical hour underwater. I was frightened. Of course I was frightened when I first went in. These things bombing all around you. It's the noise, really, is the main thing that lives with me, actually, like bombs hitting the water. But after I've been in about 20 minutes, I realised they weren't going to hit me. They're far too clever for that. They don't hit each other, do they? Nature doesn't do that sort of thing. So they weren't going to hit me, and I drifted out from the boat a little bit and got myself right in the middle of them. And then it was just a case of keep firing away. And I think over the hour, I took about 900 shots, and I've probably 800 of them are just rubbish, out of focus or not working. But as I was looking through them that night, I came across this one and I thought, oh my life, it almost could be a composite, couldn't it? You couldn't position these creatures any better. So yeah, that's a very special photo for me, and it always will be, I think.
That one got the top colour print in the print championships, am I right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And it also got accepted into the Masters of Print.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
so I saw it in Birmingham when I went over for the Masters of Print opening there, and yeah, it's a pretty breathtaking image. It's just one of those images that will stay with you. So a personal favourite as well.
Yeah, lucky. It was a lucky one though, and again, I'm not being disingenuous. Of course, you've got to put yourself in the right place, but the other 899 are nothing like as good as that. And so this image is special to me because it represents the culmination of my approach to photography, or for competition photography anyway, which is a project-based approach. So rather than rely on look and repetition, I try to visualize the image, which is often an image I've seen of someone else's. So there's another, and his name just escapes me, very well-known sports photographer who's got some images like this. And I wondered how he did it. And anyway, I contacted the diving school up near me. I'm lucky there's an elite diving school in Sheffield. And again, just built up the rapport and went and did some shots for them for their publicity, and then covered their gala and things like that, and ultimately culminated in plucking up courage to ask them if I could mount high-speed flash. This girl's actually diving off a platform. I put the board in, composited it in because it's more photogenic than a concrete platform, but actually she dived off a concrete platform, and I've got 4 high-speed flashes on the platform, which I'm sat in the stands about 80 meters away, and I trigger from the stands. So I mentioned I'm an engineer, so I love projects that combine, for me, as much of the fun of getting the image is about the whole planning of it and the execution of it. And if it involves a bit of technology and a bit of engineering, I'm like being an engineer again, playing at it. So that's why it's special to me. Yeah, I like it, and I'm still working with them now, and I hope to go back post lockdown and get some more of these images. Excellent.
Would it be Roger Evans?
Thank you. Indeed, it would be Roger Evans. A lot of my sports work was inspired by seeing Roger Evans' work. Yeah, definitely. And so this image is special to me because it represents, I had to go back twice to get it. So I went diving in the Caribbean to photograph tiger sharks and hammerhead sharks in April 2018, and was lucky with the tiger sharks, but very unlucky with the hammerhead sharks. Only one turned up all year. All week. And I particularly wanted the hammer. I don't know what it is. It's just this ridiculous shaped head, isn't it? And they're extremely nimble underwater as well. They're an extremely agile fish. Sharks move beautifully and gracefully, but a hammer moves in a different way entirely. Very sinuous and beautiful. And so I went back again the year later, and of course I'd only seen one the previous year, so there was no guarantee I was going to see one the following year. But fortunately I did. I saw quite a few actually. Quite a difficult creature to photograph actually, because he's not particularly photogenic. To be able to get that head and get the angle and make him look attractive is, actually it's a she, is actually quite difficult. But yeah, I'm pleased with that one. So that's my hammerhead shark.
How many rows of teeth do they have there?
I'm not sure, Ross. I'm not terribly good, you know, with these sorts of questions. I bet Bill Hall would know more than me. But I do know that the teeth keep constantly replacing.
Yeah.
That's why lots of divers have got shark teeth. You know, you do find them on the bottom. They
I
kind of
wouldn't
fall
like
out.
getting a finger in there anyway.
Nah, that would not be a good idea. Nah. Next one, please.
There we go.
And so I've put this image in just because it represented a significant point in my photographic journey. It was the first image where I put something of myself into it. So the poster, if I showed you the raw image, it really does look a very uninviting image because it's in the corner of a very busy gym. And when I came home and started looking through the images, we didn't go to shoot portraits. We went just to shoot. It was part of a boxing project, actually. And I saw this poster, and Muhammad Ali, that just happened to be the corner where we shot it, I promise you. No design at all. And Muhammad Ali happened to be a childhood hero of mine. And I loved his cockiness. Of course, he was very good at what he did. But I also liked his stance on the Vietnam War and all the rest of it. So he was a childhood hero. And when I processed this image, I decided to make the poster as much about as important in the picture as the person. And I called it hero worship. And the reason I called it hero worship, I'm not actually talking about the guy who, by the way, it's the first time he's ever put boxing gloves on in his life. He's just there for a try box from the university. Shows you how a camera can lie. But the hero worship doesn't relate to him at all. It relates to me. And this was the first image where I actually committed, if you like. I committed something of myself and pinned my flag to the mast. And it's always, you know, are people going to get it or whatever? So it was a bit of a seminal moment in my progression, if you like, and people did kind of get it. So it gave me confidence. And I can truly say that any of my competition images are as much about me, what that sport means to me, what that person means to me, how it talks to me, as it is about preparing it to do well. Of course I prepare it to do well. Of course I want it to do well. But there has to be something of me in it for me to be able to really commit. Because I do spend a lot of time. I mean, something like that probably took me 4 or 5 hours. So next one, please. And this is similar again, really. This is not a, you know, I'm not telling you it's a world-class image, of course it's not, but it's special to me because, first of all, it was shot in my home, so I'd set up a simple home studio, something I'd thought about doing for a long while, and I just bought a cheap backdrop off eBay, and I'd already got the studio lights, but I did it in my living room, to be honest. And then the model is the granddaughter of one of my friends, a shooting buddy at another club, and he'd shown me a picture of her beautiful auburn hair, and it's the very first time, her name is Lily, she's holding a lily, but her name is Lily. It's the very first time Lily has posed in front of a camera, and she was absolutely remarkable. She had both her grandparents and her mum with her, all sat in the lounge watching her, and she was remarkable for nearly 2 hours. And I've got some really, really lovely shots. So it's important to me just because it represents a staging post, if you like. And I've done another home shoot since, and I'm going to do some more. I found I relax more. I'm more relaxed than if I go to a paid studio. And I think to some extent, maybe, you know, the people might be as well. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it pans out. Next one, please. And so this is special to me because it was a trip to Yellowstone in the winter, Yellowstone in the USA. And this is Mammoth Springs. And it's called -22 because it was -22. But that's not why it's important to me. It's important because it was on a trip run by a guy, well, one of the tutors was a guy called David Clapp. And he shoots his landscapes with a 1:400 lens with a converter on 1.4 converter. And he shoots small portions of the landscape. And that fall across the top where the water's coming across, it's mostly frozen, is actually only 2 meters across. And most people, if I ask them, they think it's like got to be 15 or 20 meters across. It looks much bigger. And he was extolling the virtues of using a long range lens to pick small parts of the landscape, because as he said, you can follow the light round, and no one knows how big that landscape is, particularly if you shoot it from distance and compress it. And this was probably shot from about 100 meters away with that lens. And so again, it's a technique I've used quite a lot since, because we all bemoan, oh, the light's not quite right on that particular escarpment. But actually, if we just look for a 6 meter square part of that escarpment, there may well be a decent piece of light. But listen, I'm not a landscape photographer generally. I don't do a vast amount of it. So, but I do use that technique quite a lot. The next one, please. And I think this is my final image. And this again is a project image. And this was a project that I did with someone who's going to talk a little bit later, Carol McNiven Young. And we both quite like the film noir sort of feel. And we put together a Pinterest board. And I particularly like the art. I find I'm inspired by art probably more than I'm inspired by photographs. And this is inspired by a Jack Vatriano photograph, piece of art. And I also liked the whole American diner feel, because my favorite film of all time is Pulp Fiction. So I like that whole American diner thing. I like the Jack Vatriano. So we set about and we built this set. We essentially built the set. So we built the curtains and the blind and everything. We went to a proper studio in Northampton and lit it. And these are clearly proper models, but we actually, designed the idea. And again, it's a project, and I really like images that come out of a project, a logical project, and even better if you do it with another photographer and you bounce ideas off each other. So yeah, that one's called There's Always Someone Watching, and I think that's my lot.
Well done, David. I think that's a French model, Boo.
It is. It is.
I had her over in Belfast last year, so
yeah, fabulous model.
Thank you, David.
You're right.
So we have one more to go before we take a break. So the last to go before we take a break is Joe Houghton. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, and I'm unmuted, I think, now.
Okay, Joe, so you are living in Ireland?
Yeah, Dublin, yeah.
But you're originally from where?
From England, a Lincolnshire lad, originally.
Right. And are you a professional photographer?
No, I would kind of consider myself semi-pro. So yeah, I do mostly photography training and kind of talks and stuff. But I feel a bit of a fraud compared to everybody else tonight, because you've all got millions of accepts and salon wins and all the rest of it, and I've only actually been a club photographer for about less than a year. So I don't have all those accolades, if you like, but I'm just showing 10 of my, the images that I like. So
I have a very good photographer lined up as well this evening, who maybe people will not have heard of because he doesn't enter salons or competitions much, but Colin Ross, I'm talking about you, of course. So Joe, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Ross, and thanks very much for including me tonight as well. I really appreciate being in such august company. So this one is Customs House Keys, and this is one of a series that I've been shooting for 2 or 3 years now. I've always loved long exposure photography. It's one of the most popular club talks that I deliver. And I started going around Dublin shooting some of the iconic buildings. But this one is a 272-second exposure. So I'm typically using either a 10 or a 15 stop filter. You know, these are middle of the day shots. This isn't golden hour shooting. And I just love the, you know, the way that the sky and the water move in this type of an image. So I'm gradually going around Dublin shooting different buildings. It's taken a long time. I'm building up a collection. So, you know, as a few of the previous speakers have mentioned, I think having projects is a great way to keep you focused on different things. And this one is a, you know, relatively long-term project that I've been pursuing, as I say, for a few years. So that's my first image. Yeah. Do lots of photo walks along the quays, and we very often start down at the convention centre, which is directly on our right, over these railings. And this was just an image that I liked of the sunset, and obviously Beckett Bridge pulling down. I don't know whether it's got any particular, you know, qualities or whatever. I recently put it into club. I'm in Palmerstown, and it crashed and burned in club. Didn't do very well, but it was an image that I liked. So that was why I put that in. I particularly like shooting the panoramic format. I think it just the wideness of the scene, and I like kind of leading lines. I hadn't realised, but a couple of people that I've, you know, interacted with photography over the last few years have pointed out that a lot of the shots that I showed them of mine were very strong on leading lines, and it's not something that I'd ever actually picked up on myself. But this one certainly has got leading lines working. So that's that one. I'm kind of almost ashamed to put this one up after seeing some of the composites tonight, but this is my first ever composite. So this is obviously Newgrange, and I'm at the bottom of the hill, right by the back fence and hedge, and there's this standing stone there, and what I did was composited in the passage tomb from Noath, just down the road, and I'd had this in my head for years and years as an image. So it was one of those things. One day I just sat down with Photoshop and I thought I'll try and do this. So I wanted to kind of create a fairy door. So the image here is that this is a kind of fairy door into the underworld through this standing stone. And Newgrange seemed to be a good place to put something like that. So yeah, you know, just simulating the light coming from that fairy door, spilling out onto the grass, and then I did a mono conversion on it because I just like the look in mono better than color. I happen to be colorblind as well, so I do shoot a fair bit in black and white. I managed to get a bronze with the sister shot to this one in the Empoti, the Nature Photography of the Year Awards this year, which was the first time I'd ever entered them. But this one is what the other one that I really like. I call this one Adoration. My wife is South African, and we were in South Africa 2-3 years ago, and this pride of monkeys come through the garden about once a day in the house, next to the house. So I went, and I knew they normally came kind of early afternoon. So I went and I sat at the bottom of the garden near the trees with the 150 to 600 lens, And sure enough, the bride arrived. And I just sat there quietly and waited. And after about 15 minutes, I was surrounded by 50 vervet monkeys, all sitting around about 20, 25 feet away from me, something like that. This great circle of monkeys. And this mother was interacting with her baby, and I just shot away. And I was quite pleased with it. So it's I put that into a couple of salons, and that's had a couple of awards and things. So it could be improved, I'm sure, with the
great expression here.
But yeah, there's that eye contact, isn't there, and stuff. So yeah. South Africa again. Was invited out by a friend of mine to a ceremony in one of the local villages in KwaZulu-Natal, and the culture there is very different, and the tribal chief each year gathers all the young maidens of the village and chooses his wife, okay, to add to his collection of wives. So all the young maidens have to come out, and they have to parade in front of the village matriarchs, and they have to go off and have their virginity tested and prove that they are virgins before they can be submitted to the king to see who he wants to choose. So there are about 50 of these young girls kind of parading, and this is a big deal. This is a huge thing. This is one of their rites of passage. And we went along and we spoke with the village elders, and they were happy for us to take some shots, and we gave them copies of the shots and all the rest of it. And this was just one of the girls, and she was, I just thought she was absolutely beautiful. And I managed to isolate her against the background and stuff. And I've not done any retouching on that photo of her skin. That's straight out of camera, that skin. It's just unbelievably perfect skin. So I was just very happy with that shot. This is my father-in-law, and this is the first shot I ever took using flash, off-camera flash. So I bought myself a single Nikon SB910, I think it was, and he's sitting out on his deck around about 11 o'clock in the morning, so it's bright sunlight, but I'd been reading up on flash, so this is an 8,000th of a second. And it's a single bare SB10 sitting, lying on the deck about 5 feet away from him, just obviously off onto his left-hand side. And it's just the first shot that I took, and it's done quite well for me in a few competitions and things. He loved it and asked for a print of it and put it up on his wall. So again, that's one of my photographic journey shots. I don't know whether it has any merit as a portrait, but
it does, yeah. Great eyebrows, those eyebrows.
Certainly. Yeah, he's indeed. I wouldn't consider myself a nature photographer by any means, but we were invited out for a meal on that trip, actually, where I shot Howard, previous shot, and this couple that had invited it out for me had a lovely garden, and I went out with the camera, and I'd taken the Nikon 105 micro, the macro lens, with me that day on my D810, and I just wandered down to the bottom of the garden, and I saw these, I think they're iris, aren't they? So I sat down in front of them to see what would happen, and this little bee came buzzing around. So this is a handheld shot, 1,000th of a second, f5, with it's the 60 mil, it's the 60 mil macro lens. But yeah, that's probably my best bee shot. I got into street photography about 2 years ago, released a little book on it last year, and this was one of the first street shots that I got in Dublin, and I call this River Dance, because they all lined up. So I was actually sitting in a coffee bar on O'Connell Street, and I just loved the way everybody came together. So it's just one of those fortunate juxtapositions of people that you get sometimes in a shot. and it's very much, you know, with the bus in the background saying you're in Dublin and stuff like that. So yeah, that was one of my street shots. I put this one in just to talk a little bit about technique. This is a composite shot, so I'm on the end of O'Connell Street Bridge, obviously pointing the camera down towards Trinity. It's a wide angle shot, so I've got the 16 to 35 mil out at 16 mil, and it's probably 8 or 10 images composited with a light and blend mode, just to let the light trails all shine up. And I took this shot, and when I got it back and I processed it, the Londis sign, where you can read Londis there, was totally blown out. So I realized that I just couldn't use this for club. I would just get hammered at club if I tried to use this. So I went back a couple of nights later and I set the same shot up again, and I shot, you know, a dozen or so light trails. But the first shot that I took of the sequence, I underexposed by 3 or 4 stops, so that the only thing that was actually correctly exposed in that particular image was that bit of the Londis sign, because it's very, very bright. And then I just brought it in and painted it in. So that's a slight composite of that Londis sign. But you know, if you think about your exposures, you can do that. But I missed that the first time, and when I went back, I was able to kind of recreate the shot and get the image that I actually wanted. And again, it's the panoramic crop to give a little bit of impact.
You're quite low there, are you? Like low viewpoint?
Yeah, I generally try and put the camera about 3 feet off the ground, and that means you're just above the height of the headlights. So you still get a little bit of the movement of headlights coming, but you also catch obviously the buses and the highlights as well. So. And I think, is this the last one, I think, Ross? This is Secret Waterfall in South Africa. Nobody gets to shoot this waterfall. It's on private land, and I only found out about it. It's featured in the film Blood Diamond, but we got permission to go onto the land and shoot this. So we were told don't go and shoot this. It's dangerous down there, but we did. So Tony and I hiked down, and it was quite a tough hike through pretty rough terrain to get from above the waterfall, where you can see up the top there, down river, and then walk back up the river to get this shot. And again, this is quite a 120-second exposure, 2-minute exposure, with a 10-stop, I think, filter on. But towards the end of the exposure, my friend of mine who was over to the right on the bank, just to the right of the image there, he said, "Joe," he said, just step back a couple of steps when the image is finished, and just don't move too quickly." So I took a couple of steps back from the tripod, and he said, just look up above your head. And I was wearing a big floppy leather-brimmed hat, so I couldn't see anything above me. So I lifted my head, and there was a branch right across the river where I'd been shooting above my head, about 4 feet above my head. And on it was sitting a green mamba snake, 5-foot-long green mamba snake. And he was looking down at me, and he'd since then he'd come off the branch. He was hanging off the branch, and his face was about kind of a foot away from my face. And he was just looking me in the eye, and his tongue was flicking out. And he was looking at me, and I could see him deciding what he was going to do, whether he was going to bite me or not. And if he'd bitten me, we were dead. I mean, I was dead. I mean, we were an hour's walk back to the house and another hour to the hospital. But anyway, he looked at me, and he decided he didn't want lunch that day, and he slithered off into the undergrowth. So we shot for another hour, and then we went home. But that's my South African story.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, folks. So, William, if you pause the recording, let me see if I can do that from here as well.
That's paused on this side. So you need to pause your own recording.
I'm just trying to find out where I do that. Pause. Okay, Carol, so you're up next.
That's you sorted, Ross.
Thanks, William. So, Carol, you're up next. You're a member of Rolls-Royce and another club, and you're quickly becoming a very well-known name on the circuit, and we're just about to see why. So, your 10 images are loaded, and you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. So, as I said, I got into photography about 6 years ago and became so passionate about it. I was kind of wavering in my consultancy career at that time and decided to actually finish working and spend as much time as possible on my photography. Anyway, being competitive by nature, I soon became interested in competitions and distinctions and tried to work out what constituted a good photograph. And the answers to that question seemed so many and so varied that in the end I decided to stick with what had worked in my career in brand marketing. So I always believe whatever you create, make it distinctive and memorable, and you can't go far wrong with that target. But it's easier said than done. Anyway, my first image tonight is called 20s Elegance, a beautiful period house and a gorgeous model. But how did I make my capture distinctive and memorable? So for me, what makes this image work is the fact that I was able to find good natural light source in the house, and it was a pretty gloomy house actually. And also I decided to crouch down and shoot up at the model Evie. I was able then to make Evie look much more imposing as well as beautiful, which is what I set out to do. In fact, I also stretched Evie a little bit more afterwards in Photoshop, just to emphasize the appearance that I wanted. With the textures in Evie's dress and the furniture, I was pretty sure this would make a good monochrome. I also darkened the rest of the room behind Evie, so she was clearly the main focus of the shot. So this image has won quite a few awards, but the highlight for me was it being selected to represent my federation, NEMF, in the PAGB Interfed exhibition last year, and it won a ribbon as well. Okay, next image. So this image of Piero typifies a lot of my photography. I mostly use amateur models who have normal Monday to Friday jobs. I like to design and sometimes make my own costumes, and I like to search out interesting props and backgrounds. I've got a good range of battery lights, modifiers, backdrops, and I typically use my local village hall just around the corner as my studio. I do a lot of composite work, and the background to this image was shot at the Orangery at Belton House in Nottinghamshire, just near where I live in fact, with an overlaid texture to tie it all together. I personally get a lot of satisfaction out of creative editing. It's certainly another way of making your images distinctive, and I probably prefer it to the actual photography itself. It just has no limits, and you absolutely never need to be constrained by reality. So composites are a big favourite of mine. Okay, next one, please.
One of the guys in Catchlight had a studio shoot with a model done up like a clown, and I think they had this exact same hat. So I don't know where you all got it from, but it's a.
It was either an eBay special or an Amazon. You know, I always pay as little as possible for most of my my costumes and props, so I can spend a bit more on the ones that really require it.
This one, I've seen this in a few catalogues, I'm fairly sure.
Yeah, this has done pretty well for me, and it also was accepted in the London Salon last year as well. So this is called Prairie Sisters. It has done well for me, but I have to say it was one of the most challenging shoots I've ever done. So the shot started out with inspiration from the book and the film Picnic at Hanging Rock, hence the Edwardian style costumes. So for the last 4 years, I've done quite a few shoots with a couple of photo buddies who share my passion for artistic and historical themes. And our shoots are always planned out in advance, our locations are recce'd, but the best laid plans sometimes go awry. So this was taken in the long, hot summer of 2018, and the plan was to shoot on a shady riverbank. We'd shot there previous year, but when we arrived this time, the riverbank was completely inaccessible, so not at all suitable for our models to clamber through in their lovely costumes. So the nearest alternative place to consider was the edge of this nearby cornfield, and to somehow deal with the horrendous bright sunshine. So when we got to the cornfield, looking at that, plus the 4 models, kind of conjured up for me an American prairies in the 1920s. So I got the girls to act as if they were posing for a family photograph in the style of the era. I asked them to imagine that they were the 4 daughters of a Midwest American farmer posing, perhaps reluctantly, for a family photograph. Because 4 is a difficult number to work with photographically, I positioned them in a triangular shape with the 2 standing at the back and the 2 sitting in front. After all, we were paying for 4 models, so it would be a shame not to use them all together in at least some of the shots. Exposing for the sunlight and the white dresses was really tricky, and not being able to see the back of my histogram on the back of the camera, the histogram, because of the bright light made it even worse. I probably should have got one of those little view things that you can use. But when I got back home and looked at the image, it was pretty dire. But I'd shot in RAW, and good old Photoshop came to the rescue. I then adjusted the color temperature in editing. I adjusted the hue and the exposure to give the sort of vintage feel that I was looking for. Fortunately, I'd shot with a tripod, and I got lots of different exposures for the sky. So I was able to swap in a different sky from the same shoot to complete the image. Okay.
There's a nice sort of desaturated look about it as well.
Thank you.
Oops.
So this one is called Worlds Apart. Another favourite topic of mine to shoot is movement and dance, and this is a fairly recent shot that I took in a professional studio this time, just actually originally on a white infinity curve. I later added the background, which is the inside of a lovely old hall, which I photographed whilst I was on holiday in France one year. Again, I adjusted the colour in post-editing. I did a bit of dodging and burning on the models to add definition to their skin and more impact generally. In this case, the lovely model, Tilly, is a full-time model, but her partner, Leon, is in fact a firefighter who obviously keeps himself uber fit, and as you can see, has natural athleticism and grace. So they are married, or they're certainly a partnership, and you could see that in the way that they dance together. So I knew the pose that I wanted in advance, and happily the pair were able to achieve it. And I think the diagonal works pretty well, and the contemporary costumes added some interest. But for me, the distinctiveness of the shot is the background. No one else has this background, and I'm lucky that I've got a whole library of interesting rooms and architecture, which I actually got in the early days of my photography by accompanying my then widowed elderly mum on various holidays in picturesque places that I probably would never have travelled to otherwise. So it's kind of funny how things work out. Okay, next one.
So this is this French model, Boo, that was in...
This is Boo, indeed. And the other model is called, believe it or not, Johnny Escobar. Unfortunately for poor old Johnny, we can't see his face in this picture, but he's a very handsome chap. So I called this a dangerous liaison. And as you've probably spotted by now, I like to create atmosphere in lots of my images. I like to use shadow to do this. It can be a challenge as it's hard to get a good print first time round, and dark, enigmatic scenes often fail to communicate effectively to judges in the 5-second assessment that some competitions have. But there you go, it's what I like to do. So, as he said earlier, this image was taken from a shoot that David Keep and I collaborated on. We both like the film noir genre, as he said, and the art that depicts this era. So we created a set of independent storyboards, and we planned out our sets and our props accordingly. We shared the model and the studio costs, but we created different sets for our respective images. So we came away with quite different shots. I think it's a really cost-effective way and a fun way of working. So as I said, my personal style is about creating atmosphere. I've come to the view that for big studio shots like this, often the best lighting effects are created in post-editing. So sometimes it makes sense to actually light the set quite brightly and then create the mood afterwards. The intention of this image was to use the body language and the props and the lighting to create a sort of mysterious narrative for the viewer to kind of work out. So the window lighting was real in the shot, as the reflection is, and then I darkened the image quite a lot in editing. And again, I did quite a lot of work on the color palette and used the contrast slider quite a lot to get this, what I hope was a final cinematic effect. Okay. So here's another image of Boo from the same shoot. So this shot was taken with really bright, balanced lights. And in fact, the wall behind Boo, the model she's called Boo, is in fact a bright white. It's a whitewashed wall. So the final effect that you can see here was all created afterwards in Lightroom and Photoshop, and plugins such as Nik Color Effects, which is my absolute go-to plugin.
Yeah.
And finally, I added a cyan filter to give the image a more 30s style effect. So for this shot, I wanted to create the impression of a kind of looking in on a private scene, a sort of inoffensive voyeurism, if you like. So getting the right camera angle was the answer to this, and I used a ladder to shoot down from. Although I had storyboarded the image in advance, when I got the shot home, I realized that certain elements of the composition weren't really working. So in my actual shot, the money was on the table on the left by the telephone, and there was no visual connection with the pistol in the girl's hand. And so the image was visually quite confusing to the eye. So in my editing, I moved the pile of dollar notes from the table to next to the gun. So there are just 2 points of interest for the viewer to take in: the girl's facial expression on one hand and the combination of the gun and the cash by her hand. Because the gun's not very obvious. I do quite a lot of work to get the gun to be visible at all. But really, that small change of composition, I think, hugely improved the image. So thank goodness for the Photoshop clone tool. That's all I can say.
My impression is that the tights are digital tights, are they?
They are, well spotted. And that was because her legs came out very bright, and because of the angle. The problem was you were just looking at the legs, and beautiful as though her legs are, again, it was a major distraction. So I tried darkening them to make it look as though she was wearing dark stockings. That didn't work at all. So I added the digital fishnet stockings. Yeah, well spotted. Okay. So this is called Luscantire Ponies. So when most of my photo buddies were 8 years old, they were starting out with their compact brownie cameras, or so they tell me anyway. But I'd fallen in love with ponies from an early age. And so I was hanging around farms and riding schools, cadging free rides. So no surprise that I still love photographing horses, and I had to include just at least one tonight. So I had this lovely shot of this mare and foal in my back catalogue. And to my mind, I wanted to create a sort of soft and gentle pastel image, not like the other ones that I've spoken about so far. I'd seen images of Luscantire, and I found a similar coastline in my own image library and combined the two. So as I said, I'm a great fan of composites when the real world doesn't quite comply and come up with the goods.
Excellent. I always talk about a restricted color palette. There really only is 2 colors in that whole image, which just makes it work so well.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so my absolute favorite art era is the pre-Raphaelite period. And in fact, my ARPS panel was entirely images in the pre-Raphaelite style. So this image depicts my interpretation of the death of Ophelia, a painting made famous by Sir John Everett Millais. This is the second time I've created an Ophelia image. The first was a more traditional daytime setting, but for this one I wanted to create a more moody nighttime effect. However, the photograph was taken in broad daylight, and all the mood and atmosphere was again created using the Lightroom exposure slider and the brilliant darken, lighten, center tool in the Nik color effect plugin. I absolutely love that plugin. So I then adjusted the color temperature again to give the image a more ethereal and slightly moonlit feel. The reflections and the foliage were all in the original shot, so the components are all part of the original shot. My Ophelia is an amateur model again. She's with a regular weekday job. She just comes and models for us at the weekends. The stream was chosen after carrying out a risk assessment. We always do that for shots, even those with a mild degree of risk for model or photographer. We actually paid a lifeguard to be our safety assistant and to be in the water with the models because we were photographing up from a bridge above, just above the stream. So yes, I'm a bit of an anorak about safety. It drives my friends mad and my family. Okay. So this is Sophie. She's a most delightful person who loves modelling and has endless patience in the studio, which is a real boon for me. So my plan for this shot was a pure vintage historical kind of image, but once I added the fan, it took on a sort of Spanish feel, which is why I eventually called it Francesca. So for this shot, the costume is from my own vintage collection, and I decided to buy a pop-up screen background on this occasion, which I'm now quite partial to using. I often get models to look away from the camera, which I believe creates more mystery and atmosphere, but again, it's not everybody's taste, and it's certainly not every judge's taste. But this portrait of Sophie's done pretty well for me so far this year. As you'd expect, I do quite a lot of editing on my portraits. In this case, I smoothed Sophie's skin a little, I brightened her eyes, and despite her already having glorious thick hair, I actually added a bit more to the photograph. I always check with my models if I'm going to do any significant editing like that. I think it's just a courtesy, really. I often find hands can be a challenge in portraits, and in this case I had to darken them a tad in Photoshop as they were distracting attention from Sophie's lovely gaze. So that was the final alteration I made there.
Was that your original background, or
I beg your pardon?
Was that the original background?
Yes, yes, it was. So this is the pop-up background, which I can't un-pop up now. Once it's sprung out of its circular bag, I can't get it to go down. But it's certainly made life easier. I don't have to cut my models out so painstakingly as I used to. Although I must say the new way of cutting out the recent way from Photoshop makes life a lot easier than it used to be.
Quick tip for you, go on YouTube and you'll find a video on how to fold up those pop-up backgrounds. They had a competition on stage at the photography show last year, and I did 7 of them in something like 8.9 seconds. And by the time, at the end of the day, whenever I came back, I think I was 5th on the leaderboard. So I don't know, I would love to have seen the guys who were faster.
Well, amazing. I mean, I just couldn't do it. It just tied me in knots. So it's just shoved in the garage now. So I think this is my final image. This is called Free Me. So Free Me won me quite a few awards back in 2018, when it also got accepted for the London Salon, which I love and always hope to make it into the London Salon. I'm sad it's been postponed this year. I also used a version of this in my successful RPS fellowship panel, not in monochrome, I have to say, and in a much sort of lighter genre than this one. But I like to recycle parts of my images if I can. And there you go, you can see the hat there again. So the storyline on this one is about a little puppet who's trying to escape from a toy shop. The costume, again, was bought on Amazon, and the mask from Hobbycraft. It's basically 2 shots combined and then embellished with a heavy textured layer and rendered in monochrome, which is a great favourite of mine. So Ross, that completes my 10.
Is that your 10? Well done, Carol. Thank you very much for giving us your story and your presenting your images. Next up is Paul Stanley. So we're flipping from England back over to Ireland again. Paul, are you unmuted?
Yes, I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can indeed.
Great stuff.
So, Paul Stanley, you're a member of the Dublin Camera Club.
That's correct, yes.
And
Yeah.
you're the Irish version of Dave Coates.
I'm the nicer version of Dave Coates.
So Paul looks after all the Irish photographers who apply for the FIAP distinctions. And it was great that we had you out with us last year when we hosted the FIAP World Cup people in Belfast.
Oh, that was brilliant. Yeah, thank you. It was marvellous that we could go up, but we finally actually managed to meet all of the FIAP Directory Board, and most of them I'd never met before, so it was absolutely fantastic. So many thanks for that opportunity.
And that was almost exactly a year ago.
Exactly, it was last weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're mainly a travel photographer?
So I would mainly be a travel photographer, yeah. So I suppose a little bit of an introduction beyond what you've said as well there, Ross. Like some of the other speakers, I've been involved with photography for as long as I can remember. I mean, I really can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in photography. Even as a child going on family holidays, I wanted to borrow my mother's box brownie and take the photographs rather than be in the photograph. So I came up through the film way of doing things. For many, many years, I was a film photographer and also very much interested in travel. So being able to combine both of them was a fantastic thing. So travel, I suppose, yes, is one way of putting it. Street is another way of putting it as well. But we'd start off with the travel aspect of it. And this is one, a few years ago, Helen, my wife, and I, we ended up in Burma, or Myanmar as it's called nowadays. And just outside Mandalay, we were in a Buddhist temple taking photographs. Now, most of these temples also have schools attached to them. And so we were just wandering through the temple complex and just turned the corner, and there was this school ahead of us. And the pupils, as we can see them there, lined up. So I just managed to get the photograph and managed to do it in such a way that I didn't cut his eyes with the bars. I mean, that was something I was very conscious of when I was taking it. But a lot of my photography will be wandering around, camera in hand, anticipating and trying to wait for opportunities, whatever those opportunities might be. Unlike some of the speakers, there's no setting up. With this kind of scenario, you can't really dictate or set up, especially when you're in a foreign country where you don't speak the language and they might not necessarily speak English. So that's it. That's my first one. And this one has done very well for me, that one did, by the way, including winning a FIAP gold medal for me, which was very happy. I was very happy with that. I tend to, when I have an image that does well and wins an award like that, I tend to retire it then at that stage. So once that one got its award, it went into happy retirement and just comes out every now and then. And this one is a similar one as well, taken on the same trip to Myanmar, in a different part of the country, but the same kind of setup. Except in this case, the school was one where there are an awful lot of novice monks. And you might be looking at that guy and saying, he's so young, how could he possibly at his age in life make a decision like that to become a monk? But it's slightly different over there in that if you're a poor person, state schooling is expensive. If you're a poor person, you will not get the opportunity to go to school. So a lot of people will enroll their boys in the monk school, and they live as novice monks like this. They get a schooling, and then when they become teenagers, that's when they're faced with the decision to continue or to leave and go back to normal civilian life. And the vast majority do that. So they end up just getting a free education, better than no education, I presume.
Excellent.
So this is just one where, again, this next one then, the next one, the monochrome one, same thing in Rangoon this time, of the capital of Burma, just wandering through the streets, wandering around, camera in hand, and again, just coming down the street, I could see there's a barber shop, and I just stood in the doorway and took some photographs. And what really gets me is exactly that there, Ross. Yeah, that guy in the background fast asleep. And it's a casual fly on the wall type of an observation. Nobody in the image really knew I was taking the photograph, so I was kind of just recording and what was there in front of me. Again, just going back to the fact I said that I started off in film. So back in those days, you had to make a conscious choice. Were you going to put monochrome, or were you going to put color film into your camera? Or, as I did, have two cameras loaded with one, each one loaded with mono and one with color. So you ended up seeing images as either being monochrome or color images. And even now, from a digital point of view, I still see images in that way. So when I saw this image, it was going to be monochrome no matter what happened. Obviously, I capture it all as raw file, so it is color. I convert it afterwards in Photoshop, but I saw it as a mono image. That's how it ended up here.
Excellent.
Okay.
So somebody mentioned leading lines before. There you go.
Yes, so here we are here, leading lines. So slightly contradicting myself, this is one where I did give a little bit of direction, obviously, to the subject. But again, same thing. Not in Burma now. We've moved to Nepal. So a few years ago, we were in Nepal, and you would have seen last year, Ross, that Helen got her fellowship from the Irish Photography Federation with a set of images from Nepal. So I was tagging along behind her.
I think I was one of the judges, was I?
Pardon? That was last year, and that was this time last year, wasn't it? So I think you were one of you were one of the assessors. Yeah. So there you are. You know a good panel when you see it. But again, this is it again. Wandering through Kathmandu in this case, and we ended up in this temple. Most people in Nepal are Hindu, but there are a lot of Tibetan refugees and a lot of big Tibetan influence coming into it. So there are a lot of some Buddhist temples as well, and obviously this is one of these Buddhist temples. And I don't know the significance of it, but there are oil lamps. I think it's a little bit like in Catholic Church, where people may have photo lamps and in front of the altar and things like that. It's something similar, except it was just a metal room on top of the roof of the temple. There weren't any statues or of Buddha or anything of that nature in there, but it was being tended to by the monks. So we got into pose, did a few different poses, and away we went. And again, this one has been very good to me as well, including getting a FIAB gold medal in the Toronto International back in 2018. So I was very happy with that one.
Excellent.
So moving to a different part of the world now with this image, and I think everybody would recognize it. It's obviously over. It's downtown Manhattan, down at the World Trade Center area, but from the other side, from the Brooklyn side, and there's great images to be gotten down there. Lots of different ways and views and things. But I just saw in this particular instance, I just saw with the piers lined up again, getting back to the leading lines. And I'm very, very fond of square format images, even though most of the ones I'm showing you tonight are not square, amazingly enough. But a lot of my images that I produce are square format images. So I will see them as monochrome in this case, and also as a square image, and line it up and crop it afterwards in Photoshop to give me the square effect. But I would have composed it when I was setting it up, so that knowing that I would be getting a square effect.
Do they have some sort of plastic coating on those?
It's not so much a plastic coating, but it's some sort of a plastic fabric or a wrapping around it. And you can see just on the top the little kind of silvery bits which are holding it all in place. It was some sort of a pier structure at one stage. I don't know how far back that was, but now at this stage it is just these piles that are left. I'm not too sure.
For wildlife and fish.
Helen thinks they're for wildlife and fish. Maybe that's the case. I'm not sure.
Somebody,
anyway, there we go.
Somebody will let us know, no doubt.
Yeah. Now, travel or street or photojournalism or whatever way you want to tag it, I'm not going to be too obsessed which way you call it. But this is one of my all-time most favorite images that I've taken, and it was taken in my cousin's pub, well, in Helen's cousin's pub down in County Kerry. And it is an authentic scene. There's absolutely nothing set up there. Obviously, I engaged with Tom, the guy, that I'm taking the photograph of, and obviously engaged with him and posed him a little bit. But all the other guys in the background, the guns in the wall and things like that, are exactly as they are. That is the pub as it is and has been for generations. Well, maybe the photographs have changed, but everything else has been like that. And again, this is one of my more, as I say, one of my favorites, my own personal favorites. Every year in October, they have a fair in Anniscall village called the Ballinclar Sheep Fair. And it was being set up outside. We were inside waiting for it. And that's where I got this guy taking, you know, just got it there for him. And again, it's been one of my more successful ones. It's gone off to lots of different places, gotten lots of different acceptances at internationals. It's actually had over 40 acceptances. And that's unusual for me because, as I said, I would normally retire an image as soon as it gets an award. It finally got an award in the Northern Counties last year, and it is now retired. So despite the fact that it's wandered the world for about 4 or 5 years, it took it until last year before it got an award. But he's now happily retired.
Can I be very rude and make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Try it with a possibly a square crop, but you'll crop into about there.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about him and his pint of Guinness. Possibly a square crop from there, but just maybe look at a different crop, make it all about him. But it's a cracking environmental portrait as it is.
It is, and actually and I think you've hit upon it there, Ross. It's an environmental portrait, and that's probably why I didn't do that kind of crop.
Yeah.
I wanted to have some of the environment in the background, but I see the merits in what you're saying, so I'll have to try that sometime. Yeah, definitely.
He's a great character.
Definitely he is, yeah. Now, that's all the things you've seen so far have been straightforward, pure photography. I do a little bit beyond that as well, especially this kind of coastal scenes, very, very long shutter speeds, minutes of shutter speeds with the 10 stoppers and the big stoppers and so on like that. And this is one of those images taken down at one of the beaches down in County Kerry. Tide is in, rock is barely showing. You can vaguely see the outline of mountains in the background, and it's all just about mood and so on like that. And it's done nicely for me down through the years, and it's one of the ones which kind of kick-started me into this kind of style of photography a few years ago. I was always interested in the slow shutter speeds, but doing them really, really slow, this is the one that kind of really kick-started it for me. And sometimes you just have to push the boat out, don't you, and do something a little bit different. If anybody knows Dublin, you know that this is the entry into Dublin Port, and that is the fantastic red lighthouse at the end of the south wall, which has been there for hundreds of years. Actually, some guy by the name of Captain William Bligh, an engineer from the Army, the British Army, was responsible for the construction of those. And he went on for other fame and fortune at a later stage, something to do with a shipwreck or not a shipwreck, but the mutiny of the Bounty and things like that. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, this is a beautiful summer's evening a few years ago, and the tide was out but on the way in. And when I arrived at the scene, all I could see were lines and shapes, and it just ended up having to be a monochrome image like this. Now, I've had other ones taken at the same time, and they ended up being color images because of the way I saw them, but this one was going to be a monochrome image because all I could see was that big black shape in the middle, which is a sandbank, and other vague shapes of sandbanks on the right hand side, and then the big line of the south wall with the lighthouse as the big full stop. And again, that's done mixed results for me. It's one of those images that I think is going to divide people. You either like it or you don't. And somebody in Germany liked it enough to give it a FIAB gold medal a few years ago, and lots of other people have never liked it and it's never gotten anywhere. And that's just how it is. It's a personal favorite of mine. I like it. And sure, that's why we take photographs, isn't it? To satisfy ourselves.
Is that as a print, Paul?
Actually, the gold medal was like this, as a projected image. But it has mainly gone off to places as prints, but in that particular instance, it was a projected image. And again, getting back to street photography, and I mean, it's all about anticipation. It's all about trying to tell stories. It's all about hoping that the gods allow things to line up in such a way that everything works. And that's what I saw with this one. The 3 sets of people there and the different things they were doing and the juxtaposition of them. And then the little triangular shape, just as you've been moving the cursor there, you've been highlighting it, accentuating it. And again, it's only a new image that I've recently produced. It hasn't had much of an outing, but it's not getting acceptances for me, which is absolutely amazing. But again, it's a personal favorite of mine. I just like it, and it's not why we do it.
Exactly. Always do it for you, not for the judges.
Exactly. What do they know? And I'm slightly cheating now by putting in this particular image. I love working in the concept of panels, and people mentioned about personal projects and things like that. I love doing that type of thing as well. And a few years ago, I was doing some architectural photography with Joe Doyle and other people, Iñaki Hernandez, down in Valencia in Spain. And the main purpose of going down was for the City of Arts and Sciences, designed by the great architect Calatrava. But in the old town, there's the Church of Santa Catalina, and there's a medieval bell tower. And if you go up to the top of the bell tower, which is what most people do, there's a nice view out of it. And if you stand at the bottom and look up, you see like the circular shape as we see in the middle one there. But you can also get fantastic shapes and colors as you walk up and down the stairs, because there's little slit windows, and the light comes through and it's diffracted into the various different colors and shades of the rainbow, as we can see here. And that's what it's all just about shapes and colors. That's it.
Is that your 10?
That's my 10, yep.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. So we move from Ireland back over to England to Paul Keane. Paul, can you hear me? So William, if we can unmute Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, Paul.
Okay.
So Paul's camera is not working, unfortunately, and he tells me that he's got a bit of a lockdown look going. He's not exactly upset that his camera's not working. So,
Bit like a badger.
So Paul, you're a member of Smethwick Photographic Society.
Yeah.
And well-known judge, and one of the first, if not the first, to achieve the top Diamond 3 FIAP distinction. And where is home for you, Paul?
Amersham.
Amersham. Now, this first picture, Paul, can I be very rude and give a couple of my comments on it before you tell us about it?
Go on then.
This, I mean, whenever Paul sent me these pictures, I just loved this picture. I just saw so much in it. And it was all about, this character. It's obviously, Remembrance Sunday or whatever. You've got the poppy, he's got all these medals, but Remembrance Sunday is supposed to be all about respect and remembering, those who died in the war, etc. And this guy just struck me as, there's that real contradiction between the military, well-cut, well-dressed character. This guy with trousers that are about 3 or 4 inches too long, his shirt hanging out of his trousers. He looks as if he's bought the medals. He certainly hasn't won those medals, if you ask me. And then you have all these other people who just look at the emotion that you get out of this couple, obviously remembering somebody who's gone, maybe her father, his father, etc. You have other respectable people, and this guy, he just looks so out of place with the medals and whatnot. So I suspect you've had a bit of success with this one, but you can now tell us about it. Maybe I'm read it completely wrong, but
I was actually going to follow on from what Paul said about 5 minutes ago. This sort of photography is not what I'm known for, but it's something that gives me a lot of satisfaction, and probably when lockdown finishes, maybe do nothing else. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
What I like doing is just capturing the moment. I like to anticipate things happening. And if I can, I like to get pictures with humor in, because it's really quite difficult to get something that, you know, that makes you think and makes you laugh, maybe tells a story. And you're right, this is Remembrance Day. It's on the corner of St. James's Park, and all the old boys form up in Horse Guards Parade, and then they walk off. And I could see this couple canoodling on the right-hand side, and there's a lovely background going through St. James's Park with this sort of misty autumn atmosphere in November. And I thought, there's half a picture there, and I just want someone else to come and fill it. And this guy was just ideal. As you say, he's not only got these medals, and he's got his shirt out, so he doesn't look smart like, you know, a normal soldier would. He'd be court-martialed for this. But what I liked about it as well, just at this second, he turned away with this disgusting look, as if he was ignoring this couple on the right-hand side. And it, you know, it's just luck, really.
Yeah.
But I just got a lot of pleasure out of that, and it was one of the first ones I did. And I thought, I'll try and see if I can get some more pictures like that, more pictures that maybe tell a story and make me laugh. And it's actually the fact that his shirt's out that I did find funny. So
what's the title for that one?
It's called Remembrance Day, and it's almost like he was remembering when he was young, and he was got a girlfriend, and now he's turned away from it.
What do you think? Did he buy those medals or steal them?
I don't know. As I say, he'd certainly get court-martialed for having his shirt out anyway.
Ross, looking at those medals, those would be World War II medals.
Right. Well, there's a military.
Yeah, actually, you can get imprisoned by for wearing medals that you don't own.
Very, very rarely is it ever enforced, though, Paul.
Yeah. Anyway, I took this one at your place. I've only been to Belfast once, and I was actually, he's gone. I was judging the All Ireland competition, not last time, but the time before, and I did a bit of a tour. Went down to Cork and did a talk in Kilkenny. And I went to where my great-great-granny was from in Clonmel and did a talk there. And then I went up to Drogheda and met up with Des Clinton. And Des took me up to Belfast and took me all around the places. Took me down Falls Road, which I enjoy. I thought that was quite relaxed, actually. But Shankill, which is where this is, seemed very, very tense and suspicious to me. You know, it's like looking over the shoulder at photographers. But I saw this place, and you've got these flags to the famous Dutchman on the wall, and the no surrender. And this little chap has pinched the big guy's ball and run off with it. And I thought, well, that sort of goes with no surrender, you know, because he's chasing him. And that sort of made me smile. So, you know, captured the moment there as well.
So was that one only taken for 2 or 3 years ago then?
No, it's the time before when I judged All Ireland.
All right. No,
There must have been about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, something like that. Is it not still there now?
Oh, it's still there. The Shankle's still there.
Yeah.
No, it was just because it had a slightly more dated feel to me, just than you know.
Yeah, well, these pictures will date, won't they?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like eventually the old soldiers will all die off as well.
Yeah. No, there's great humour here too.
Yeah, this one's the end of the pier. This is at Brighton. And, you know, I was just walking down the pier doing different pictures. and I saw these girls on a hen party, and they made me laugh. So I took a picture of them. They didn't mind, and I quite like, you know, when you look at it, the idea of Crazy Claire on the left, her glasses are falling off, and I've got no idea what this third woman's trying to do, but it's a good job she got white jeans on, I think, the third person, because that made the picture. And then in the corner, you've got This Way to the End of the Pier. So that made me smile as well. And all their bags and things on the floor for a good time.
Surprising to see what looks like a bottle of water there. You'd expect to see a bottle of gin or something.
Yeah, could be, yeah. Now, it was Brian, wasn't it, who was talking about the nude bike ride in London?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I quite often go up to Trooping the Colour. And after that, it's quite often on the same day. And I'd photograph similar shots to Brian, but I thought I'd get in the crowd, and there's all these Chinese tourists. And this main one in front with a mobile phone, the expression on her face made me laugh. And when I looked at it as well, she's blowing her cheeks out, and the other one, just to the right of her phone, is sucking her cheeks in. So I thought that was quite funny. And then you've got the bare backsides in the background, so you can see what she's photographing.
Did you have a clever title for that one? There used to be a Queen song.
Not yet. Sorry?
There was a Queen song called Fat Bottom Girls.
Fat Bottom Girls.
Play on that, Fat Bottom Men or something.
Yeah, it could be. I'll have to work on that one. I'm usually all right.
Talking of Fat Bottom Men.
Fat Bottom Men. You see some funny things in London that always, you know, always find something that'll, you know, give you a humorous picture. And these guys had been on a charity run, dressed as gorillas, and so I sort of followed them a bit down the street, and they got this gorilla outfit with the backside sticking out. And then over the road, by luck, you get this two other couple, and I like the way the chappie in front is like almost like he's running off to get out of the way, and she's looking almost as if the fronts are hanging out as well as the backs. So that made me laugh as well. Gorillas. I'd love going down to Brighton Pride. My wife knows about it.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, and I always take one of my mates with me, so I'm all right. But they get a bit. My mates get a bit fed up when I run after old queens like I did with this guy. I saw him and I thought, my God, he's a picture. So I chased up the other side of the road, and he didn't see me, and I got myself into position. And as luck would have it, he was late for the ball, and he got these high heels on, and he couldn't walk very quickly. So he took his stilettos off, pushed them under his arm, hitched his dress up, and started walking in bare feet, as you can see. And as it happened, he just walked past a chiropodist. So I mean, that made me laugh.
Yeah.
Most of these pictures, I think, work better in monochrome, but this one's a color picture for sure. But it's just, you know, it's just getting the timing right.
Yeah,
and anticipating it as well. Well, you can see what I'll call this. I ought to call this. Did anybody see Peter Kay's car share the other night on TV?
No,
Did you watch that?
No.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. There's two people in a car, and there's confusion over what's meant by dogging. Well, this is the dogging picture, and I was up in Lincoln for the steampunk fair, and I quite often like going around looking for people who look like their dogs. You see a lot of it at Crufts, and I go there quite a lot as well. But I thought this guy was an absolute classic. He didn't know I was taking it, and it's another picture that's got to be in colour, really. So I just thought it was so funny.
I mean, the blue and orange is just, you know, heaven sent there. The blue jeans, the orange dog, the blue t-shirt, the orange hair, the blue rucksack.
They're not going to win any prizes or anything, but I just like the fact that I've, you know, just captured something that makes me smile.
Excellent. No, this one here doesn't have to make you smile.
Well, this was a bit of anticipation as well, because it's at Notting Hill Carnival, and you get some wicked people there. And I saw this girl coming down the road, and I said to my friend Malcolm, who I was with, I said, "Watch out for this one, Malcolm, there's trouble coming." So we got ready, we got in a good position, and she just went and rubbed up against this poor copper who couldn't get out of the way because he's backed up against the railings there.
He doesn't look as if he's worried, mind you.
I think what happened was somebody, maybe his mate, I call this not while you're on duty, George. But I think his mate told him he was being photographed. So he looked over at me with this broad grin. And, you know, I thought that was absolutely hilarious. I could have sold that to the paper if I'd have been a bit quicker.
Yeah, not half. Yeah.
Brexit's been a bit of a gold mine as well for this sort of picture. And I went down to one of the marches. Not many photographers there, although Roger Hans was apparently there, and Steve Smith, I met there. But there's so many characters, you know, arguing on this Brexit march. I call this one, it's this big, but I thought he'd got a great face. I got quite a few characters that afternoon. It was, I say, just an absolute gold mine.
You counted the earrings in his ear?
Yeah, they're it's the Celtic thing, isn't it? Is it? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Not. I don't know. Don't know the answer.
I've got no idea which side he was on. I suspect he was a Remainer, but I don't really know. You couldn't always tell. They were all mad.
No, this is just brilliant. Please tell me the title for this.
Yeah, this is called "I Told You Not to Talk to That Actress." I took it. Do you know about Fatima? It's a Catholic. Well, in 1917, 3 children had a vision of the Virgin Mary. Well, that's what the church says anyway. But they had this vision that kept coming back every 13th of the month for 6 months, and on the November. 6 months after the first vision, there was a miracle that a lot of people apparently witnessed, thousands of people witnessed. And so they built a shrine at Fatima. And that was in 1917. And then 2 of these children died of Spanish flu. And the third one became a nun and went into convent and died, I think, in the 60s or 70s. Fairly recently, anyway. But this shrine is an amazing place. It's and I went there long time ago, and I saw all these characters. Yes, Portugal. Yes, Portugal, Bill. Sorry. And I saw all these characters, and I thought I must go there again because 2017 was the centenary, and the Pope was there, and he beatified the 2 children who died, so they'll become saints eventually. And I thought I'd get some good characters, and this was the best one I got. I've got no idea what they were arguing about, but they were really going at it. And you know, I thought it just made me laugh, actually.
the background there, you've
I've
darkened all
taken all the background down. Yeah.
I mean, it's just cracking.
This is because it's simple. I think it's the other ones aren't simple enough, but this is the only one that's actually done anything in competitions. I haven't entered the other ones, but I think if you want to do well in competitions, it's got to be a fairly simple story.
Yeah.
But as I say, I think just capturing the moment and getting something that's humorous is what I enjoy, really. Probably more than bird photography now.
Yeah. Excellent. So, Paul, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your 10 images.
Okay.
Next up, we have 2 people left, Colin Ross and Rod Whelans, and we have a policy of keeping the best to last. So with Paul Keane and Colin and Rod, a lot of you may not have heard of Colin. Colin, can you hear me? Is Colin unmuted?
Yep, I'm here, Ross, yep.
So, Colin, you're a member of Catchlight, and you're a landscaper, that body of photographers that tends to sort of suffer in competition. But I have to say, the quality of your landscapes show maybe quite a few landscapers why their landscapes don't do well in competition. You're a big fan of the Scottish landscape, are you not?
Indeed I am, yes. So much a fan, I've decided to build a house there.
So you're building a house on Skye?
On Skye, yep, yeah.
Lucky you, I look forward to the invite.
That goes without saying, absolutely.
So Colin, talk us through your first image here.
Okay, well, just a wee bit of a background on myself here. I've been taking photographs for many years, and in my early times as a photographer, I used to listen to an awful lot of people, and they give me a lot of advice. And my style of photography was very scientific, and it was regimented to some degree, and I wasn't really going anywhere. So I decided at one point that I've really got to develop my own style, my own processing, my own way of doing things, my own way of looking at the environment and things. I can't take portraits. No good at street photography. I really admire those that can. I'm landscape. I'm a solitary photographer, and I spend an awful lot of time on my own in the landscape. I do get up at crazy hours in the morning and stay out till crazy hours at night just to capture the right light, capture the real colours. So I've developed my style of photography without need for rules now, without convention and judgment. In other words, I've given in to myself my own style, which is about me and my expression of what goes on really in my mind. Sometimes it's very deep and meaningful, and sometimes it's quite light and airy, and that reflects in the photography that I do at any point in time. As Ross said, I spend an awful lot of time in Scotland. I had to cut short a holiday or a trip there recently because of the COVID situation back in March when this particular photograph was taken, which is in Luscantyre. Probably one of my most favourite spots in the whole of the UK. You really can get away from people here. It is changing, recently, but there's a lot more tourists coming to the area, but you can find places of solitude and places of isolation in the landscape here. And it's a different type of landscape to anywhere else in the UK. It's very open, big skies, big landscapes, and it's absolutely beautiful. When you get beautiful sunsets, you get them on the Outer Hebrides. This was taken, I tried to keep this as minimal as possible. And these landscapes out here change so frequently. I've been here so many times, and this particular shot with the sand curving down into the distance, it was only there for a matter of a few days, and then it was gone. The erosion from the sea and the wind just takes it all away. And then you're left with something completely different, something completely new in the landscape. But I tried to make sure that I captured this with something that's going on in the background, and the light is a big part of that. the light from the evening sun. You do capture the best landscapes either first thing in the morning or last thing at night. And that's what I tried to do here. I tried to exclude elements of humans and human interaction in the landscape. And you'll not see any people or very few people in my landscapes, this being one of them. There's a couple of footsteps which may have been there from before I arrived, but for the most part, my landscapes don't include people. Okay, next, Ross.
You're a Canon shooter?
I am a Canon shooter, yes. I bought a 5DS, well, it must be about 3 years ago now. Gives me fantastic results. So this shot here is a lesser known spot on the Isle of Skye. It's a place called Loch Langig, which is up on the north of Skye. People drive past this when they're traveling around the island, and they miss it completely because it's not visible from the road. You've got to walk off the road into the hills. And again, first thing in the morning, it gives you beautiful light, beautiful play of light on the rocks in the foreground, right through to the golden colors in the hills in the background. No people about, absolutely no people about at that time of the morning. This is probably 4 o'clock in the morning. Or sorry, but I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is taking probably about 5, quarter past 5, sometime around there. Okay, next. Very famous spot. A slightly different angle to what most people do. Most people will walk further around the headland and take over shots over the rocks. There's a very famous boulder on the island, or on Melgall, that everybody heads towards. I try to avoid that, try to create something a wee bit different. And I saw the stones on the foreground, and the colours in those stones are just absolutely amazing. That is as it was. There's no changes to this at all. Maybe a wee bit of dodging and burning and pulling back in the sky, but pretty much that's a straightforward image. I do manipulate my images to some degree. I will, if necessary, put in a new sky or whatever, but the real essence of the photograph is still there. That's what I saw on the day, and that's the way I wanted to portray it. Now, I don't show an awful lot of these in exhibitions or competitions because they're me, they're part of me, they're part of my whole psyche, my whole thinking, my whole connection with the landscape, and that's just me. Sometimes I'm a bit selfish, I don't really want to share that too much with people, but that's just the way I am, just the way my photography is, and I like to keep control of my images. So next one, Ross. This was again in Scotland. This is Anstruther, which is over in on the east coast. Again, a very early shot. This was a 5-minute exposure. So we're getting complete stillness in the image, and the banding that you see in the sky actually was there during that exposure. So again, there's not very much changed. Now you will notice that there's a couple of birds sitting on top of that lamppost and on top of the wee lighthouse. They actually sat there for almost 5 minutes, which was just a big bonus. But the play of light on the water, leading you right into the lighthouse and then to the sky beyond, it just worked for me. Okay, next. Much closer to home this time. This is Donaghadee Harbour. This shot happened by fluke. I couldn't sleep one night, so I decided I would just get up, grab the camera and go out and see what I could see. And I headed down to Donaghadee, which is about 10 miles from where I live. Not a soul about, dead calm, beautiful sunrise coming up over the sky, which the colours just lit up the whole of the harbour itself. But I love the way these two wee boats in the foreground seem to be herding in the boats in the background with these ropes dripping down off the pier. I love the stillness of this. I love the calmness of this. This was reflective in my mind at that time. You know, just be calm, be still, connect with what's going on in the landscape and create something from that. So, okay.
You obviously own a drone as well.
Yeah, I do. This photograph wouldn't be possible without looking at alternative types of photography, and drone photography is something I've tried over the last couple of years. This is the biggest long-range selfie you're ever going to see. I'm actually standing down in that wee group of cars way down on the beach. And drone photography adds another dimension into the whole taking a picture thing. Yep, way down there. Because you've also now got to control an aircraft as such. You know, you have elevations, you have distance, you have a whole lot of other things which you're thinking about, not just the photograph at the time. And, you know, there are times when there's cheek clenching moments when you think, well, is the drone ever going to come back? Am I going to lose it or whatever? But at the end of the day, it's about the image. And I think I've tried to capture this in a late evening with the sun just reflecting off the side of Musselton Temple there, Musselton Temple on the north coast of Northern Ireland. Now you can see how close that temple is now to the face of the cliff. You don't realise just how close whenever you're standing beside it, but it is just about hanging over the edge now. And at one time, apparently, you could drive a horse and cart around the front of that. So it's, over the years, it's just dropping off, and at some point, it will drop into the sea.
And this is the main railway line that'll take you up to Derry, I presume. It is, yeah, yeah.
Okay, this is Inch Beach in Dingle. It was a November time, and it was pretty cold. There were very, very few people on the beach. There was a couple of runners running up and down, but that was about it. I loved the colours, the play of light on the beach, you know, reflecting between the blues and the golds. This small branch wasn't actually there at the time. It was sitting further up on the in the dunes, and I lifted it and put it down on the shore, just to give it a little bit of foreground interest. The reflections of that in the sand and the way it points up into the distance with the blues and the way the light plays on the mountains in the background, I think really works well. Okay. This is a place that really does connect with me. It's taken in Sossusvlei in Namibia. This is taken outside of a light aircraft. I managed to ask the pilot if I could open a small window, which is about 4 inches square, and stick the camera lens out. And he let me do that. I created a heck of a noise with the wind rushing by, but I didn't stop shooting the whole time I was up. But it just shows you how interesting the landscape can be, how abstract the landscape can be when you look at it from a very different angle. That body of water that you see just up on the right-hand side is the only body of water in the whole of the Sossusvlei area. They had a particularly wet period whenever we were there, and the water just gathers in these areas of flats until the sun bakes it dry. But the colours and the angles and the play of light on those on that landscape just works so well. It was taken later in the evening, just before the sunset, to give me those long shadows, to give me those long details, and it helped emphasise the detail in the sand as well. The scale of this place is just enormous. It's hard to comprehend, but when you're there, it's very easy to understand just how dangerous the landscape is as well. If somebody was to drift off into over the dunes, they could get lost very easily, because one dune looks just as much as the other, and you could get lost in the heat, and without any real sources of water, you could die very, very quickly out there. Now these dunes are enormous. Some of these are over 1,000 feet high. It's difficult to show the scales when you're looking at an image like this, but this particular image is more about the abstractness of the landscape. It's more about the desolation of the landscape, more of what the landscape used to be, and we're treating it so differently now. It's becoming something that it really wasn't. I love to connect with nature. I love to get out there and see it in its rawest form, and that's what this image really does for me. Okay. So, I mean, I do love landscapes, but I like to work on small projects as well. I did a collection of photographs on abandoned buildings, derelict buildings. This particular shot is taken in a place called Commons Cop near Lüderitz in Namibia. It's an old German mining town that was abandoned in the early 1900s. It was just left to the elements, and the elements have taken over. The sand has now entered the buildings, but there's still remnants of the people that actually lived in these buildings. You can still see their personality reflected in the colours of the walls, whatever's left. You know, there's old bathtubs in these places. There's old cooking ranges. There's an awful lot in these places that just creates so much interest, but creates a connection between the present and the people that lived there so many years ago. It was a German mining town, and they mined diamonds, which were pretty much found on the surface of the sand or the surface of the desert in this area. It's all been cleared now, but I think there's still areas where diamonds are prevalent on the surface of the sand. And you're restricted from going off the roads by more than 100 yards or something like that, because they are so prevalent. You can find a lot of semi-precious stones in the area. And this sand is extremely corrosive, especially in the outsides of the buildings, because it's all laced with crystals. It's laced with semi-precious hard-wearing materials that are eroding everything from the outside, especially the winds. With the winds that come in from the Atlantic, they whip up the sand and they create a very abrasive maelstrom of erosion.
There's a little diamond there, Cole.
Could be. I missed that one. Okay, this final image that I have was another small project that I did. This was taken in the Kruger Park in South Africa. I did a private safari, and it was one of those safaris where the drivers will actually drive into the bush rather than on tracks. This young leopard cub was sitting between two trees. Its mother wasn't too far away, so we were kept in the Land Rover. But we got very, very close to them, very close. Now, this was a colour picture, and it didn't work for me because the colour in the background was very muddy, and it took away from what I really wanted to get out of the picture, which was to, the connection with the animal itself. And there is a real connection there with the eyes say everything about this young leopard cub, and I wanted that connection. I didn't want anything else to distract me from what I was actually photographing. I do have the colour pictures as well, but they don't work as well as the black and white. I used this in a ARPS panel, along with a whole selection of high key wildlife images, all taken around South Africa and Namibia. And I just love that intimacy between myself and the young leopard cub.
Okay, is that your 10, Colin?
That's the 10, yep.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So, last but not least is somebody we all know very well over in Scotland, Rod Whelans. Mr. PAGB, are you there?
I am indeed, yeah. Can you hear me?
You're still awake, Rod, yeah?
Yep.
So, Rod, you have sent us 10 excellent pictures, as we might expect. Environmental, portraiture, travel. You do these trips to Turkey over the years?
Yeah, Turkey. We went to Brazil this year, but Turkey we've been doing now for 12 years, I think. There were a couple of people listening who been on tours with me, but I suspect they've all switched off now. I used to be a landscape photographer back in the day. I mean, I started like Paul, I started very young. I had my first camera when I was 7, I think. And I've been photographing all my life. I'm not sure how much people know my photographs now, because I don't enter exhibitions all that much anymore. Did all that in the 70s and the 80s. And in the 90s, suddenly I discovered people, and I became a people photographer. And then my family grew up and left, so I was able to travel more. And I discovered that really what I'd always been was a travel photographer. I just didn't know it.
It must have been a different Rod Whelans that got the top mono print in the print championships last year. Then was it?
Well, yeah, it occasionally happens. I do shoot a lot of other stuff, but travel photography is what I love doing. And what I've put in here, I've concentrated. I've put 10 pictures from Turkey, going back a decade. I think they're all taken in different years. We've traveled all over Turkey, all the far-flung regions, and we love it. This was one of the high villages, the Yelara, and it had these posters up in the corner. I'd been there 2 years earlier, actually, and those posters had been there, and I kind of sat somebody in the corner and took a quick picture and realized later I hadn't made the most of it, so this time I made a lot more of it. This guy was dragged over from playing cards or okay or whatever it was he was playing, and he sat in the corner for ages. The leather jacket was a big thing, and I got somebody with a white shirt, a big chap with a white shirt, to stand on the other side to reflect some light back in. You know, these sophisticated techniques, I hope, make a difference. Yeah, next one. These guys, yeah.
Unknown image in salons.
Yeah, this one's been around a bit, yeah. I set it up in a tea room, actually, so that 2 or 3 people could come and have a go. So we made this almost like a little studio, and I got the guy with a stick and a bunch of mint. I don't know why he was clutching a bunch of mint. He hung on to it for ages. And he sat there, and 2 or 3 people photographed him. And then the other guy came along and said he wanted to be photographed as well. So he thinks he's the only person in the photograph at this stage. He doesn't realize I'm photographing both of them. I just thought they went really well together. And then a couple of hours later, in the same village, I discovered in another house, I found this picture on the wall. And I thought that could have been them. So I call it brothers now and then. I don't even know if they're related, but that's what I call it.
Yeah, I had noticed the play on the moustache here with these two, but did you ever watch Father Ted?
Yes, he definitely looks
just absolutely Father Ted.
Yeah, I was expecting him to say drink anytime. This lady we've visited several times. I think 4 times we've actually been to her house. Wonderful woman. First time she had rabbits, and she kind of brandished them at us and threw them about. And then one time we went, she had this duck. She said she'd had more of them, but she didn't know where they were. She lived on her own, but her neighbours looked after her. Unfortunately, the last time we went, which was last year, last year, or maybe the year before, we arrived a fortnight after she had died, and we left the pictures with a neighbour who cried when she got them. So there you go. You'll have seen this picture by lots of other people, because there were about 7 people there when she had this duck, and I think they all got a good picture.
With the blue and orange, with the orange beak of the goose or whatever, is just fantastic. Did you give her that orange?
Oh no, we never gave her anything. People in Turkey, they give you things. You know, when you take a picture, they give you something. They don't expect anything. What we do is we make small prints, 7x5, 9x6, and we carry those around with them, and we find the people. If we don't go back to the same area every year, but every couple of years or 3 years, we might go back to the same place, and we find the people and we give them the photographs. And of course, as well as the fact that they really appreciate those, it gives you an entree to other people's houses. We like to get into people's houses as much as we can.
Presumably they don't have cameras at all in the poor end.
Well, they all have mobile phones. They all snap with their mobile phones. Turkey's not a third world country. They're quite well off. They just live the same way that we used to live in the 50s, really. You know, they're just a few years behind.
Simple life.
This guy wasn't quite so happy about being photographed. I always try to interact with the people and get a little bit of their story. The only thing I got out of him was that he was fattening these sheep for Bayram. Bayram's the sacrifice festival. So these sheep have got about 24 hours to live, and they're killed in a not terribly pleasant manner as well. And people carry lumps of bleeding carcass around the streets, you know, back to their homes. his job was to fatten them up just for that day. So he'd only had them a week, I think. Yeah, next one. I call this one Reasons to be Cheerful. She looks a bit grumpy, doesn't she? She wasn't really that grumpy. She was a very nice lady. But she didn't think much of the politics of Turkey. She doesn't think much of Erdogan, who's the president. And she was at great pains and great length to tell us how unhappy she was about it. And that's why she looks so grumpy. Her daughter is actually hiding around the corner of the doorway because she was embarrassed by it. But, you know, funny enough, we went back a couple of years later. Next one. Same doorway, same lady, wearing much the same clothes, I think. And again, she was telling us all about how things had got worse, not better, in the 2 or 3 years since we'd been here. Her daughter had left home by that time, so we weren't able to photograph her. But she's just telling us how difficult life is. For these houses that they live in this part of Turkey are wonderful. I think they're cedar, I'm not sure. They're not painted or anything, they're just, and they're wonderfully weathered. Just great places altogether. Knocked together mostly with hammer and nails, really. Yep. It's quite unusual in tea rooms. Tea rooms are wonderful in Turkey. We just come back from Brazil just before lockdown, and we were really disappointed that they don't have anything like tea rooms, places where you can just go in and sit and watch local life. In Turkey, they have them everywhere, but it's very unusual to see a woman running it. It's nearly always a man. This woman served us with our tea and stuff like that. And then she sat down to read this letter. She looks unhappy about it, so I called the picture bad news. That's what it seemed to be. It's one of those that judges often don't like, I think, because of all the Dorito packets. They think that kind of spoils the period of the piece. But I mean, that's how it looks today. That's how Turkey is. A mixture of old and modern, and I just thought it was great. Loved the old scales. I thought they were really good. Yep. This is tea break. They have glasses of tea. I got very fond of Turkish tea. It's wonderful, except when you buy the same stuff here, it's not as good. I think it's just one of those things about, you know, when you're on holiday, things taste a lot better when you're drinking them in the country they come from. We went to a tea plantation. We've done that more than once, but we've been a couple of times and seen them picking the tea. And unlike in Ceylon, where they pick off the tiny little things, they just chomp off great chunks of it and they throw it all in, twigs and everything, go into the blend eventually. Anyhow, we came into this shop. This guy was here. He wasn't actually having a tea break. He appeared to be working, but we got him a glass of tea from across the road. We sat him, there was about 4 of us there, and we sat him in all sorts of places in the shop. We had him rattling chains, we had him picking up tools, we had doing all sorts of things. And then eventually we did the shaking hands and saying thank you. Teşekkür ederim is in thank you in Turkish. And we did all that and embraced and did all that stuff we probably won't be able to do again in the future. And then he left and went down the street to his own shop. That's when we discovered that the man sitting in the corner was actually the shop owner, not him. So there you go.
He's quite a dapper guy there. He's like a film star sitting there.
Yeah, he had a metal shop similar, but this wasn't his. This is a lady who actually waved us in. We tried very hard. Well, I don't mean we're pushy, but we encourage people to let us into the house. You know, they're on the doorway and we kind of look past and we say, oh, looks nice, and they invite you in and give you tea and stuff like that. But this lady actually waved us in from across the street. She saw the cameras and she wanted us to show us this house. This is a Greek-style house. It's in central Turkey, but it's a Greek-style house. There used to be a big Greek population in Turkey and a big Turkish population in Greece, but they did what they called a population exchange. It was a slightly more gentle, slightly more sophisticated ethnic cleansing. People came back from Turkey and they were given a house that had been left by the people who had gone away. And this lady's granny was given this house. But of course, they hadn't really been able to maintain it at all ever after, really. They have a problem as well with their succession laws, that this house is now owned by about 15 people, all their cousins and everything, and they don't want to spend the money. The picture at the back is Ataturk, who's the father of Turkey. You find his picture absolutely everywhere. He won the Battle of Gallipoli, of course. Yep. I think this is the last one, is it? Much to the relief of the long-suffering audience, probably. I mean, I really like this picture. We were staying, you see these urns just up through that doorway. We were staying in a hotel up there, but the village was so remote, well, not a hotel, but a place anyway. The village was so remote that you couldn't even get transport up there. We had to carry our cases right from the bottom of the hill, basically, up there. But anyhow, I'd seen this guy. He opened this doorway and he brought out this donkey. I've met this guy before, in fact. I didn't know his name. It slipped my mind for the moment. But I saw him bringing out his donkey. And there were a couple of other people with me. And I said, oh, let's follow him. Let's see what he's doing. They decided they'd go off for a glass of tea. But I followed him all down the street. And he took it right down to the bottom of the village. And he gave it some water. And then he brought it back again. And I followed him. I took lots and lots of pictures, but this was the very last one. And this really, for me, was the best one. I call it bent by work. You know, there's lots of holes in all his clothing and everything looks a bit worn, and he's stooped with the effort of it. And the donkey looks as if it's got more holes in it than he does, really. And it looks like it's pretty well done its turn. I just thought that both of them looked trodden down by life. Well, by age, really, not by life. He was really quite a jolly person. And I kind of muted the colours as well because I thought that suited the image. I love travel. I love travel photography.
There's a great diagonal aspect to it with the hill there up to the shed.
Yeah, I have a bad leg and it was pretty hard to get about. But when there's a photograph, you do it.
So is that your 10, Rod?
I believe that was the last one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got through that quite quick because I think people must be getting a bit tired.
Excellent, folks. We have run on as usual, but thank you all for attending. It will be recorded and put up on YouTube. So thanks very much, folks. If anybody wants to hang around, just give me a second. I just stopped the recording.